What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a quasi-impromptu, logical, plausible, probable live stream. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the result of ongoing both annoyance and concern for the very blatantly obvious puppetry that is now YouTube atheism. And just modern secular thinking, spiritualism, and New Ageism, and all the different philosophies and ideas that attempt to circumvent the underlying rational, logical, plausible, and probable conclusion that there is the creator and the underlying cause for our very existence. And I really find it fascinating how people in comments, debates, books, all these different things, each time I go down the proverbial rabbit hole, you run into the exact same level of either ignorance, inability to comprehend, or the conscious refusal to address, recognize, or contemplate the underlying facets that connect the dots, if you will. You know, on one side, you've got the strict materialists who want to act like there's nothing beyond the physical. On the other side, you've got the mentalists and the people who want to say, oh, there's nothing more than the mind, and therefore everything else that we're observing can't actually be viewed as any kind of actual evidence or reasons to conclude something, or potential, giant road signs as to, hey, this is the correct conclusion to be reached, because, hey, it's all just in your mind, therefore nothing is actually real or substantial in any facet. And this really is kind of being epitomized in the last couple of days with the debate between Boy and Standing for Truth. The other night, and of course this whole tangent was on ontological mathematics and how it's all just, conscious thought, the difference between perception and conception, and empirical evidence, and induction versus deduction, all these different things. And the ultimate irony for me was the conclusion that an uncaused cause must exist and can be proven through ontological mathematics. However, by default, it disproves the Christian God, or really just kind of any God in general. But of course, in that context, it was specifically the Christian God. And the disconnect with that conclusion from the potential extenuation of the logic just continues to blow my mind. And it's not just Boy, it's many other atheists. They all have this same rigid mindset that unless Genesis delineated every aspect of quantum mechanics, in this context ontological mathematics, or any other piece of information about our very existence, therefore it must disprove anything about religion, Christianity, anything of that nature. So anyway, in line with all that, I kind of, out of curiosity, because I've read some stuff on this before, but I actually bought the ontological mathematics book that Boy was holding up like it was the Bible. I was cracking up about that. But as I'm reading through it, I'm just cracking up at the obvious ignorance of both the author of the book and Boy in his application of it. And I'm using him as an example. Many others apply the exact same points and from different perspectives. They clearly do not understand what is the potential understanding of existence from the biblical worldview. And, very often, just like in this book, it's like all about the Catholic Church and the rigidity of the Catholic Church. Well, I categorically reject the Catholic Church. So I'm not really sure how that makes any sense. But moreover, it obviously showcases the lack of understanding, at least in modern society, of there's differences in belief between and understanding and conception and doctrine in between, say, a Protestant and a Catholic. A Presbyterian inside of the Protestant subset, you've got a Christianity, you've got Presbyterians and Methodists and Baptists. They all have their subtle differences, and they also have barriers in some aspects of their understanding or more rigid interpretations of different things. But that doesn't mean that there's not substance from the macro point of view. And if you don't actually have any understanding of it yourself, but then to claim that by default the thing you don't know about is completely 100% disproven by this other thing, that actually, if you have understanding of both, actually reaches very similar conclusions. It just showcases the level of ignorance, or your brainwashing, or your inability to think critically, or your refusal to think critically and big picture in terms of the macro level of our existence. So to get into a little bit more direct example purposes. So the thing we hear ad nauseum from YouTube atheists is, you believe in God, therefore you believe in magic. Okay. No. I believe that the creator of the universe would have the capacity, since he created the laws of physics and chemistry, as an example, would therefore have the ability to bend them to his will, and the elements that are subject to said rules would be able to be manipulated by the entity which created them in the first place. Like, I don't understand how this is such a incomprehensible premise when it would, just to dumb it down, this would be like saying the person who invented silly putty wouldn't be able to both have put together the different underlying components and then been able to shape the silly putty into something that they wanted it to look like. They shaped it into a freaking house or whatever, right? Like, this is not exactly rocket science to comprehend this. Like, the silly putty didn't exist. Now it does. Now it's shaped to be something else. Like, this is not exactly rocket science here, folks. Let me take that a step further in terms of like the whole ontological mathematics, and this also applies in many aspects to quantum mechanics, which is ironic. In the ontological mathematics book, like the whole foundation, like the first several chapters is all about like, Bohr and Planck and all these different people as they were, beginning to discover the principles of quantum mechanics, having their minds blown. But many of the things of the more rigid worldview are starting, being somewhat negated or dramatically redefined as their understanding of, what are the underlying principles, and hey, things don't exist, they're waves until the collapse. I mean, all those different things. So in the context of, the ontological mathematics and all things, we're all minds, and of course this applies to, some of the more extreme variations of string theory and different philosophies that, hey, we're all just part of a giant mind, and, all intricate parts and such, different strings on the neurons inside of the giant brain, so to speak. When you really get down into, what is the cause of existence, and in the relation to both QM, this is the question, as well as in the ontological mathematics book, and they get into the whole aspect of conceptualization, right? And to me, when you really think about this in relation, I've tried about this many times. When you really think about, what is the origination of the in Genesis, what is actually happening, right? So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, whatever. And then it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay, so if we think about this, and get back in context of both QM to an extent and ontological mathematics and the whole premise behind it, is if we are all the realization of conceptual thoughts, right, and all of this is ultimately the extenuation of the mind, then everything that is being actualized is the result of a thought, which I have zero problem with. I've actually gone off on many tangents about this, and in the context of does this whole premise just completely and utterly annihilate everything about the Christian God, for example? Well, let's think about this. Let's swap the word "and God said" to "and God thought, and it was so." Okay, so if this goes back to things like the observer problem and other aspects of quantum mechanics, but the wave collapse, all these different things of, okay, if we are ultimately the extenuation of mental thought, which again I don't have a problem with, it still requires the pre-existence of the uncaused mind in order to realize the intent of the creation. Now, when you extrapolate this out for idiots such as it chicked cunt, whatever, who says, seeing as God has done nothing in 6,000 years, you would think he would have time to say hello to one or two of his many followers. Okay, so in that context, number one, it would be, so if Jesus Christ is the personification of God in this plane and served as the entity which altered the course of history, I would just have to say that the incredible ignorance that you are displaying would be clearly delineated by the fact that you're claiming God hasn't done anything in 6,000 years except send the physical manifestation of himself to Earth to interact with humanity and to expound upon the underlying principles of their very existence, and to give them a insight into the future of their existence from the eternal perspective. And this goes back to the ontological mathematics thing and this whole aspect of, time, space, and all the different facets of that not being as rigid as what we try to perceive them as from our current perspective, which is ironic because I actually have talked about that myself, and see absolutely zero conflict with that in relation to the Christian God. So, number one, the entire premise of, under one of the underlying premises of Scripture is that God exists outside of what we perceive to be space and time, that ultimately we are immortal and have eternal existence. So right now we are currently observing our existence through a finite lens, but we actually do have an immortal component to ourselves, and that would be our minds. So if the ontological mathematics worldview is that we're nothing but minds, and the entire premise of Christianity ultimately relies upon the fact that we have immortal souls, i.e. minds, that have been created by the prior existing uncaused cause, I'm really not seeing the conflict in the two perspectives. Ontological mathematics book goes on to talk about the speed of light and everything. And it's like, man, how interesting that it might not be what we perceive. Oh, no kidding, really? Interesting. I've actually had many conversations about this exact thing. I've even got my own little quasi breakdown of my personal theory about solving the starlight problem and the is light subject to time in the same way that we are. And that's ironic. I was reading through the book. I'm just cracking up as to what they were describing as something that I wrote I originally wrote a long time ago, put it on a Google Doc relatively recently. But the whole point that I've made is that, let's zoom in here. The literal 1-2 sentence abstract. Speed of light is relative to the observer. It is both infinite and finite simultaneously. Time is only relative to the observer, not to light itself, and only matter is subject to time. Therefore, C is simultaneously infinite and finite. I mean, the point I'm making with all that, reason I'm showing that, is for the ongoing atheist ignorance and talking points are just continue to showcase the sheer level of ignorance and refusal to even consider things beyond their myopic perspective, which is ultimately limited by their desperation for the God of accountability, the God that requires accountability, provides accountability, necessitates accountability for actions being true. It must be something that is separate or not actually result in, or does not actually result in any potential ramifications for their actions in this current plane of existence. And I really find it fascinating how, again, and we'll reiterate this one more time, YouTube atheists specifically claim that there is no way to reconcile the Christian God with any deeper understanding of the underlying requirements for our existence. I mean, it's anyway, it's ongoing stuff. But that leads me to a slightly different diatribe. And if I saw him a minute ago, if what's his face, Jackie boy, Jack Hoff, if you want to come in and talk and expound upon your point you were leaving in comments earlier, I'm about to post a link to join the stream inside chat if you would like to come in and have discourse. I made the same offer to Boy, but apparently he can't come. So there's the link. So, in line with all this stuff that I've been talking about, a extenuation of the point being made about the rigidity of the YouTube atheist worldview is, it goes in line with the discussions about abiogenesis and, the underlying requirements for life to exist, the abstract components. And I find it just amazing that we can have dogma on both sides in some aspects, but as our knowledge of the universe, as our knowledge of existence, as our knowledge of the fundamental requirements and underlying necessities for matter to take form, and the clearly delineated differentiation between living and non-living material, which for the ontological mathematics followers, for the spiritualists, for the individuals who refuse to accept any god but will believe in the esoteric and the mystical, they both accept that there must be something like that while simultaneously refusing to consider the points that substantiate those types of concepts, and then you've got the hardcore atheists who claim that it's not possible there could be any external cause for those delineations, all the way to the extreme that even though we're able to clearly define what is living and what is not living, that we're actually not smart enough or don't have the capacity or the perspective to actually know what is different between living and non-living material. And I just find it so fascinating. Oh man, look here. We got, looks like we're going to have Jack Hoff join us. Jack, what's going on, man? Welcome to the stream.
Hello.
What's going
on? Nothing. What's going on with you?
Well, I'm giving you an opportunity to expand and expound upon your points that you made in comments earlier.
Yeah. So my point was, if abiogenesis turns out not to be possible, it doesn't prove a God.
Okay, so first, let's get this cleared up, because first you said you're talking about intelligent design, and then you swapped that to God. So
yeah,
which one is it?
I should have just said God, because most people conflate the two. But if we're being specific, I mean God.
Okay, so you're going down the general path of lack of critical thinking skills that is very common with people on YouTube. So are you suggesting that if abiogenesis is proven to be impossible through undirected naturalistic processes, that intelligent agency is not the rational conclusion as the root cause?
I'm saying to jump to a God conclusion.
No, you're the one. No, that's not what I asked you. That's not what I asked you. You're the one jumping to God. I'm asking you, is it rational or irrational to conclude that an intelligent agent of some kind must have been required if undirected natural process is not plausible explanation?
So it's irrational to jump to a false dichotomy. That's the point I'm making.
And that's okay. And you're saying the false dichotomy is God, correct?
Right.
Okay, so that's not what I asked you. So again, let's go back to.
This isn't true. It isn't mutually exclusive. So you can't just jump to a God.
Okay, so again, are you listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth and your original words? Okay, so I'm saying that before we reach the jumping point that you're talking about, you're saying we shouldn't jump to that point. I'm in agreement with you. So again, we're moving God from the equation as the answer. Okay,
but you can't. That's my point.
Yes, I mean you can. I mean you can go to panspermia. There's all sorts of stuff.
You can, but now we're not talking about what I was talking about. That's my point.
You're referring to abiogenesis, which in this context would be a chemical process which results in life, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and from the atheist / agnostic / God does not exist, there is no intelligent agency period required for life to exist. Then an undirected process must be the way in which life came to be, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if the conclusion is reached that through undirected natural process, life existing is not remotely plausible, what then becomes the rational conclusion?
We don't know is the rational conclusion.
So if you've concluded that natural processes that are undirected, what else is there?
Well, we didn't rule out all natural processes. We ruled out.
No. We're talking about, in a hypothetical here, right? If we have ruled out natural processes,
you said chemical means to generate life. That's how, right? That's how you defined abiogenesis. It depends how you define abiogenesis. That's part of it.
And ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, here we have the embodiment of the standard YouTube atheist who tries to dance around and not actually address something, and they're like, "Well, you didn't nail down every single possible iteration of every possible semantic variation." Okay, so in the as I clearly delineated initially, is it your position that abiogenesis would be an undirected chemical process?
Yes. Yeah.
That's okay, then. So, if that is the case, and it's undirected, then what causes it? Is it natural causes?
I think that natural causes are what generated life.
That's not what I asked you. I asked you if there is no agent, if there's no external agent that is acting upon those chemicals to make the processes occur in a particular sequence, then the only thing you have to work with is natural forces, correct?
If there's no agent, then it's only natural. No, that's not necessarily true.
Okay, so this is where we're going. Okay, so now you need to answer me.
Can still be natural. An agent can still be natural.
Dude, nobody considers the natural forces to be agents. It's a natural force. It's a natural cause versus agency. Like, agency is something that's specifically doing something on purpose, like not a okay. Nobody in the context. Okay, so are you suggesting that anything other than intelligent agency can perform an action with specific purpose that is not just a random extenuation of the laws of physics and chemistry?
I'm saying that agency can be natural. We have agency, and we are we are apparently natural.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we don't have intelligent agency?
No, I just said the opposite. I said we do have intelligent agency.
You just tried, dude. You literally just attempted. Okay, so by framing us as natural, are you attempting to claim that we are not intelligent agents?
No.
Okay, then what the hell do we have to do with undirected, purely naturalistic, undirected via agency causes to result in abiogenesis?
Hey, so, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of fuzzy.
Hello?
Kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, sorry, I can't hear anything.
Why don't you leave and come back? Obviously, you're playing the static game because you know you're getting annihilated. If you want to come back, feel free.
I'm doing no such thing. I'm doing no such thing. I've said what I've been saying since the beginning, which
you're breaking it, man.
Creating a false dichotomy.
I'm not creating a false. Dude, you're the one creating. You're the one creating the false dichotomy.
Is shown not to be true?
Okay, in this context, you are literally the one creating the false dichotomy, because right now we're discussing what is the rational conclusions about well, you're forming into a dichotomy, right? We're talking about intelligent agency versus undirected naturalistic process. That's it. That's all we're talking about right now.
Rational conclusion. Here's a true dichotomy.
So are you suggesting
this is very simple.
Here's
the true dichotomy. If chemical means are shown not to produce life, then chemical means don't produce life. But that doesn't immediately suggest that a God is necessary, or a God exists, or a God created life. That's all that means.
Okay, so again, we haven't been talking about God. We've been talking about intelligent agents. So
I'm talking about God, which is what we talked about at the beginning. Remember, I said most people conflate intelligent design with God.
Okay, dude, you gotta go. Dude, you gotta get it. Dude, you gotta get a better. Dude, you're roboting. You're roboting. Disconnect and come back in. Wherever you're at, you have a horrible signal. You're breaking up. Exit and reload. Something's going on. Get on some Wi-Fi or something. Oh, we'll see if he comes back. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, case in point of the exact point I was making at the initiation of this stream, that oh man, it's really amazing. Smokey, is that actually you, or is this a?
Yeah, bro. What's up? No, it is actually me. Yeah, I'm on my phone though because I was out doing a few things, and this for some reason, like the StreamYard, like listening to the StreamYard, actually is like better than listening to the YouTube on my phone. And since you were live, I figured I'd just do this. So I'm not necessarily needing to participate. I was just to say hi to you and like be here to listen to it from this side.
Oh, gotcha. No, you're welcome. The premise and the kind of overarching concept I'm putting forth in this stream is that what's your opinion? Would you agree, disagree, say proof is in the pudding, or what's your general thoughts on the whole diatribe I've been going off on?
Proof is in the pudding brains. Yeah, you know my stance on this, man. I've been with you on it. It seems almost to have reached a level of dissonance. In fact, I've been wondering if like atheism, at least modern atheism, the way it's kind of manifested in our culture, isn't just a kind of like a steaming pile of crap that happens to attract flies, and the flies happen to be all the barely functional, mentally backwards, autistic retards of our society, and they just can't really help themselves. They're just kind of gravitated to the steaming pile of crap because it just aligns, perfectly with like what they are as an individual. And so we see these like complete and utter mental separations of any type of, like, when we look at it as, well, this is a logical argument, and you're explaining it in even preschool terms, and it just does not seem to connect. And by the way, speaking of Mr. Jack in here, which I hear this regularly, this is common, and you'll actually pitch a dichotomy. And the first thing an atheist says, false dichotomy, false dichotomy. Okay, well, if that's true, then you are obligated by the statement of stating it's a false dichotomy to tell us what the third option actually is. And see, this is what they always fail about, because I think Christians, usually in terms of argumentation, are keen about putting dichotomies out there because it is a natural normative state of affairs to look for things that apply to the rules of non-contradiction. And this is how we all help logic our way through our world and find out what's real. And yet the atheist is willingly seeming to negate all grasp of these basic logical principles in order to validate their perspectives. And I find it almost to this point cringy, if not laughable, in some of these demonstrations, bro.
Yeah, it really is getting rather fascinating. And Jack, you're back. We'll see if your audio's working here in a second. The case in point to the point you were just making of,
okay,
well, if it's not an undirected process, okay, well, what's your solution then? I don't know. Okay, so we have clear evidence in all of aspects of.
That's the only rational answer, by the way.
Well, no, the atheist argument is, well, I don't know, but not God. Like, I mean, you realize how weird and philosophically inept that position is that all these atheists hold. Why? We have to.
I have no problem with God. It's just that there's no evidence.
Okay, so let's go down. So let's go down a little rabbit hole here. So Jack, are you a chemist?
Yeah.
Okay. Biochemist, organic, inorganic. What's your focus?
I think a chemist should be able to afford better internet connection.
You're breaking up. You're roboting. Hello? Jack?
Why is this such an issue for like everyone but us? Like, what is this? Jack, we
Jack,
can't actually
hello?
hear you, by the way. Yeah, okay, now you said something. Okay, we heard you there.
Can you hear me
okay,
now?
so yes. So are you a inorganic, organic, biochemist, synthetic chemist? What's your focus?
Organic.
Okay. So are you suggesting that a process which requires, say, 80 steps with multitude of temperature changes, washings, and so on and so forth, purification processes, etc. Are you suggesting that those could occur without your direction? What is wrong, dude? What is wrong with your, like, seriously? You say one word, and then when I ask you a question, you magically go into like Fuzzville. Dude, go
Sorry,
connect
am
to,
I suggesting what?
dude, go connect to Wi-Fi and come back in. Man, this is getting really obnoxious. Go connect to Wi-Fi. You're wasting time. Go connect to Wi-Fi. Come back. I don't know how you were able to carry on conversation for the first couple minutes, and then magically, when you're actually starting to get interrogated to back up your own crap, you magically go into robot mode every single time you start to talk again. Go connect to Wi-Fi. Get on a laptop. Come back.
He's gonna school us, bro. He doesn't know how to figure out his own internet. Apparently, he's gonna school us though. We gotta figure some stuff out here.
Man, I just don't understand this stuff, man. It's like, you're an organic chemist. Okay, then you beyond most people. Like, it's like, man, go to your, okay, let's say you actually is a chemist and just full of crap. It's like, okay, dude, go to your peers, show them your lab notebook where you have 300 steps to reach in, X endpoint of your objective.
Right.
And then be like, I think this can happen naturally through undirected process. And then they'd be like, bro, there's 300 steps, man.
That's an awful lot of faith. That's an awful lot of faith. I was a little disappointed because after you took him down your rabbit hole, I wanted to take him down the rabbit hole of whether or not he actually even has a functional definition of what evidence even is.
Yeah. I mean, but on the flip side of the point I was making, let's say they're now looking at, let's say one of, somebody he doesn't know in some other lab on the other side of the world creates some compound, organic compound, right? And he gets a sample in the mail and is looking at it under a microscope and just being like, wow, look at this thing. This is nuts. Like, how did they pull this off? And then being like, man, and somebody's like, yeah, dude, there's no way that happened naturally. Like, somebody must have built that one, right? But it came in an anonymous test tube. Nobody is ever going to be like, well, we don't know who did it, therefore I just don't know how it happened. Like, nobody would ever make that argument, or if they did, they would be considered an idiot. And all their peers in the lab would look at them and be like, they'd go to the lab director or the professor over the project or whatever and be like, so I think that Jack Hoff might need to get removed from the project because he thinks that, like, nano cars create themselves, that kind of thing. I mean, that's what, if in like synthetic chemistry, right? Like that's what would be the result. Like, hang on, you think that this created itself? You're nuts.
That's why I'm really interested to hear him unpack like how he is a biochemist and is possibly coming to any philosophical justification of the belief that any of these compounds can synthesize under naturalistic processes. I would love to hear some of his justification for that.
No, look what Sal just said. A few weeks ago, Jack Hoff said he was a statistical geneticist, not an organic chemist. So basically what we have here is a ignorant fool who is trying to spew a bunch of crap and doesn't actually have the capacity to back up his own BS. Which, irony of ironies, one of my, as you guys may know, one of my favorite things I've ever said is, let's pause for just a moment here, ladies and gentlemen.
That's worth it.
I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on all things, but I do take the time to research the points that I'm going to make. I go and look into them and make sure that I'm not the only person that thinks this, you know, or at least have some ability to substantiate the logic underlying the premise that I'm putting forth. You know, I know you do the same thing. That's the thing, man, that really gets me about, you know, how we hear ad nauseum from the atheists that they're all about logic, right? But then, and they claim that they can just eviscerate ours, but then they can't even put forth their own that's remotely rational. You know that?
Well, they can't even repeat ours usually. They can't even understand the arguments that we're even usually putting forward. Just weird, you know, blanket claims of denialism. And like, it's just, you know, it gets painful at moments, dude. Like really, like, and you reach a certain point. I'm sorry, but you are probably going to be worthy of ridicule. Like if you're reaching such a point of like denying even basic cognitive logic, like if you're operating in the world as such a dangerous agent where you are able to deny even basic logical inferences, like to me that might be a little bit of a problem, like even on like the grand scale.
I would have to agree with that. I would definitely have to agree with that. And here's the other thing about the original, like the subject of this stream, right? Are atheists becoming puppets? I mean, number one, I think that's.
I love the title, by the way. Good title.
I think it's obvious beyond all doubt at this point, right? They're the puppets at the end of the strings of, you know, the Matt Dillahunties, Richard Dawkins,
Right.
etc. And then the irony of that is that those individuals are the puppets or at the end of the strings of the evil powers, right?
Right.
And you know, just being completely manipulated through their own anger and, you know, refusal to accept that they are not the pinnacle, right? That ultimately we are accountable, and that's why
susceptible and accountable. Yeah.
In the first, you know, 5 or 6 minutes of my tangent when I first started the stream, I was talking about the whole piece of, you know, one of the end objectives, whether consciously or unconsciously, of the entire reason for atheism in the first place is to somehow convince yourself that you are not accountable to an external entity. That's what it boils down to. And
I agree. And if I may, it also brings with it a bunch of extra baggage along with it. And it's always the dirty laundry that the atheist is trying to hide. You know, the fact that now they have vacuous morality. Now they operate in a perspective of the world of basically pure nihilism. You know, the meaningfulness of things has been either negated or diluted to almost nothingness. You know, it ends up creating, I think, a perspective of the world that is just downright fundamentally toxic.
Yeah, it's and that whole aspect of the puppetry, it really amazes me. And part of where the idea came from too was, you know, I was thinking about Pinocchio, right? And the difference between Pinocchio, the puppet, I'm talking before he was given the breath of life, right? And then the wooden Pinocchio, and then Pinocchio when he becomes a boy, right? You've got those steps. And I'm kind of like, all right, so atheists are like a hybrid, like they're the in-between stage between he's just the piece of wood and then he's the kind of alive wooden boy, right? Or at the very beginning, right? He's trying to understand his existence, right? But now he's no longer got the strings. He's able to move his own hands and everything, right? And I'm like, it's like the atheists have wanted to, instead of going on to the next stage of becoming a real boy, right? In this context, understanding existence and beliefs, rebirth, etc., etc. They're consciously wanting to go back and have the strings tied to their hands and feet, right? And be actual puppets. They're wanting to be puppets. So think about, like, in your debate with Cosmic Skeptic, right? One of the underlying components of his worldview is that it's all deterministic and we have no true control over our actions. Yeah. Okay, well, what is that other than you're being a puppet to physics and chemistry? Like, in this context, in the context of this analogy, the laws of physics and chemistry are the strings which move your hands and feet like a puppet. And
yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. And within almost infinite level of faith and acceptance. I mean, arguably as much faith as we place in the divine, they certainly place in, the bloviations of supposedly educated men. I don't know why they think that their paradigm is more virtuous or better substantiated than ours. I don't really understand it.
Well, true. And the initial start of this stream too was on the whole ontological mathematics deal from the boy versus SFT debate the other night. And I don't know if you saw that, but the
one last night.
No, last night that was Snake and Matt Slick. I'm talking about the night before.
Okay. No, I didn't catch that one. No.
Okay, so the whole premise was that we're not, everything's just we're inside of a giant mind, basically. We're all the result of a mind. But somehow that premise, and that everything is conceptualization of thought, right? That somehow that equals.
Oh, by the way, you might want to post the link again, Maddox. Just saying, I think Jax might be ready to come back in.
Okay. The entire premise of this ontological mathematics whole deal is that we can prove the necessity of the uncaused cause. However, it, in and of itself, completely destroys the Christian God. I'm like, what? It's all a result of a mind, therefore everything about the Bible is wrong. And I'm like, so hang on. You clearly haven't been listening to me or many other folks that talk about this stuff. Like, and the irony, I've actually bought the book because I was like, I kind of perused some stuff online. I'm like, I'm going to buy the books. I've been reading it. And as I'm pouring through it, I'm like, so this is written by somebody who has no actual understanding of Christianity. And they're like bashing the Catholic Church, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, the rigidity of the Catholic Church, I reject entirely. Like the premise of it, the fundamental structure of it, I reject completely. Like there's a few little pieces of it that like Jesus Christ existed. I mean, that guy's different, but I mean, in the context of like the macro level of my understanding of our existence, yeah, I toss it. It's like out the window, And but the point I was making about the whole puppetry, it's like, so you are being told that what I believe, for example, is directly negated by this theorem that actually could act as a foundational component to my entire worldview. Like, oh, we've got mathematical proof that there is a mind external to all this and it is the cause of it. Like, sweet, I agree, 100%. It's
right.
It's pretty funny.
Spot on, dude.
And the whole aspect of like the eternity and time being an illusion, basically time being an illusion, not real and stuff. I'm like, yep, I'm pretty sure I've gone on tangents about that on more than a few occasions. Like, I agree. What's your point? How does this negate the Christian worldview?
Yeah, none of it actually even makes their case. Like, I don't know where this thing came from. In fact, Snake tried to pull it with me last night because I went over to the after show for a little bit, and I was actually kind of hoping my priority was to confront Slick on his predeterministic Calvinism, but he left, and so I was stuck with Snake. So I had to walk him through, a couple ridiculous, stabs at the philosophy philosophy that he's trying to use. But I mean, dude, it's just like the lights won't light up, like the cogs won't turn. Like I don't understand what this is about, dude. Like it's so weird, like to go in and point out like, pure, philosophical failings, and there's just nope, I'm still good. Like, like or see like what'll happen is like you'll challenge them on something, and instead of actually answering your challenge, they'll just make a statement of affairs. Like I forget what it was. I confronted Snake on something, and he just said, "Well, oh yeah, that's right." I was confronting him like, "Well, where do you even get your justification of your paradigm for morality? Like, where do you even like get the justification to begin from?" And he starts talking about how freedom naturally manifests from, as a derivative from evolution or some such garbage. It's just a natural objective thing that freedom exists, so you can build morality off freedom. I'm like, okay, well, you just stated like a statement of affairs that freedom exists. You haven't given me an actual argument as to why freedom is moral, or that freedom is a moral paradigm that is obligated for people to abide by. All you did was state that it exists and it came from evolution. Like that doesn't actually answer anything. You're just stating like something that what something is. And that's like what the atheists do, like on Speed's channel. Like, what is Speed even doing right now, dude? Going through a philosophy of math textbook. Why? Because we want to see a brain dead old tweaker try to retard his way through a textbook that a bunch of actual professors will go through and post their lectures online for free. Like, what does this even do? What, philosophy of math is true, therefore creationism is wrong? Like, what even is this stuff? Like, if we can do enough talking about naturalistic processes, then that means we can have faith that everything is naturalistic. These are non sequiturs. There's no connection. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, true, true. One of the things I find very entertaining about, and this goes back to the time argument, right? And like, so on one side of the equation, we've got physicists who, and theoretical physicists and such, who are arguing that time is nothing but an illusion, right? On the other side, we've got people like myself who also kind of, for all intents and purposes, I kind of believe that, right? Like, we're in the now, and ultimately there is eternal existence, and that we will always be. When you remove the physical limitations from the equation, then time is no longer relevant or relative, and then we're all now in the now, right? But also from a realization standpoint, right? And to me, when you really contemplate a lot of the things that are talked about in like near-death experiences and such, that's one of the fundamental things they all talk about, right? Like, time didn't apply, and at least not in the same way, right? And they were being able to experience multiple things simultaneously.
Right.
So,
right.
And that's not some like outlier thing. Like, that's an extremely common element of NDEs, right? And to me, when you really think about that in the context of the things that we are beginning to understand, or at least kind of scratch the surface on in quantum mechanics and just the different aspects of science, right? Like, that we're starting to kind of sort of be able to even remotely comprehend, right? You think about that, I'm like, number one, that makes eternal existence really freaking interesting. And if you don't think so, then you're a very narrow-minded fool, in my opinion. Right? Like, whether or not it may not be true, but I'm just saying, if that concept is true, then the premise of the immortal eternal existence takes on an entirely different perspective. And it also, in my opinion, starts to place context on the whole, one of the things that, atheists have such a hard time with, right? Of like omniscience and omnipresence, right? The major, in my opinion, the major barrier to omniscience, omnipresence, etc., and ultimately omnipotence is being limited to space and time. Like, well, exactly. That is the barrier to omnipotence,
Agreed.
Omniscience, omnipresence,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah, spot on.
So if you are not bound by those things, then those concepts are, at least from my perspective, no longer are these like imperceivable, premises that just have no plausibility, right? I'm like, yeah, it does, but just not from the finite worldview. And I think this is where the problems that are on full display with YouTube atheists in relation to the strict materialist worldviews, right? If you think there cannot possibly be anything that is not subject to the laws of physics and chemistry, then it's going to be impossible for you to perceive what I just talked about and what we're discussing right now. Like, it's not possible for you to comprehend that. You've put a multi-layered bag over your head and muffled your senses to the extreme that somebody would be yelling right next to you and you wouldn't perceive it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think I got where you're going. Yeah.
Somebody's joining us.
Yes, guys.
Martin, what's going on? Welcome to the stream.
Good. I don't think you guys have to take that Jack seriously, because look at his name. He really badly wants you guys to read his name and say it out loud. It's like a troll name.
Yes. Got it.
So I really think we don't have to take him seriously.
Well, I don't. I think that's very unsuccessful. He literally wants everyone calling him Jack Hoff and think that that's like helpful to him. That wasn't very brilliant. Now, was it, Jack?
No, he's probably really glad you said it. But
well, I'm known for that kind of thing. So if anyone was, it would be me. So there you go.
He says he feels vindicated.
There you go,
his
Jack.
argument-
Win for you. Take that with you.
His argument is kind of messed up, because it's like if you reduce the amount of other hypotheses that's available, then your current hypothesis gets stronger, or your current theory gets stronger. Like if we can say a computer can't come from natural processes, then the other theory of coming from intelligence gets stronger, isn't it? Or because there is no alternative theory.
Agreed. I mean, and that's the thing with the subjective, objective opinions that we hear all the time from the YouTube atheists. At some point, it kind of to the point you're making there, Martin, of, do you think it is not the rational conclusion that the computer didn't create itself? Right? Like, if you don't think that, if you operate from the perspective that you think that somehow through undirected process the computer could create itself, then I don't really take your other argument seriously. It's just, at this point we're reaching such levels of extreme fantasy that it's not closed-minded, which is the ironic accusation that's made towards the theist, that we're the ones that are closed-minded.
I feel like I always wanted to ask Godless Engineer if we had like 1 trillion bottles of Diet Coke and just like left them around for like 1 billion years, would we get life? Like, I kind of wanted to ask him that, but
yeah, well, they're it's crazy. Looks like
is Jack
Sal's
coming back? Is Jack coming back?
No, he says, anyways, this was fun. I'll come back when I'm not on my phone if LPP will have me. Yeah, not with that screen name.
That one's been broken. I mean, you can bring that screen name to my stream. That's okay. I'll deal with it.
But I think one of the big problems atheists have is that they really badly don't want it to be true or something, because they use like silly skepticism. They would run to any excuse, no matter how stupid the excuse is, to explain away the evidence.
Agreed.
So it doesn't matter how much evidence you give them, they run to any excuse.
Well, and any excuse, and Smokey kind of alluded to this earlier, any excuse other than God is acceptable in the atheist, specifically the YouTube atheist worldview doesn't matter how implausible it is or, borderline nuts to come to this conclusion. You believe in, to quote T-Jump, you believe in farting pixies and unicorns. It's like, come on, man. Let's get you actually think that's a rational comparison rather than a blaringly obvious straw man? I don't know what is.
Kevin Shea calls him our sky guru or something like that.
Sky Guru.
Something like that.
What, you know,
I think
what's so
because I recognized and made him feel bad, like how cringy it was when he said Sky Daddy, so he switched it up to that. So, but you know, still cringy.
so I
He
was
still
watching.
bugs me, dude. He still bugs me to this day, Maddox. Like he has not stopped. Like this whole time.
I claim responsibility.
It is your fault. It is your fault.
I know. I agree. So last night I was watching a presentation from a couple months ago from a former big dog in Silicon Valley in the software space, right? Whose new venture is in applied genetic programming. Okay, and he had retired, gotten rich as heck, retired to Hawaii, all this kind of stuff. Out of the blue, like completely, at least from his perspective, just serendipitous interaction with somebody. He found out about the fact that you can that DNA is software, and it intrigued him. And he's like, "Huh?" So he went and started talking with some big dogs, right, about it, and learning more about it. And this one guy who developed all sorts of amazing new concepts and technologies was getting ready to retire, and he's like, "So you're retiring. Would you be open to me extenuating your research and starting a company to do this?" And he agreed. And so now he's invested a bunch of money. Now they're expanding this whole deal. It was hilarious hilarious in a good way, right? Listening to his exposition about this whole deal and the way he was just describing and expounding and explaining to this group about how it's literal software, right? And man, the data storage capacity is so vastly superior to anything that we've ever created. I was just laughing my butt off last night listening to this from a big dog, right? He made billions, okay, and then being oh, so we've been making this not that this isn't stupidly complicated and hardcore and high level stuff, but we've been acting he's literally saying things we've been thinking this is just all chemical reactions. No, this is this is hardcore software programming. If we can figure out how to hack this and create new programs and we could be immortal. Just we could solve any disease if we could figure out we could figure out how to write a patch for
we can do miracles.
When there's an error in the code, we can figure out how to create the patch for it. We could solve disease. I'm just saying, yep. Mm-hmm. It was pretty amazing. But of course, he was just yet another. This was from this year, right? Or from 20,
August
of 2020, something like that. And he was talking about it in the context of delivery in relations COVID treatments, different stuff. And I'm cracking up. Anyway, it was very.
Here's an idea of how poisoned the well becomes by the rampant extremist naturalists that tend to bogard and control academia. Let me draw, because they do ask atheism is good for things and naturalism helps us discover things and all this other stuff. This whole thing they had with the foundation over in England, I don't know, where they're offering so much money, for you to be able to
Society.
Thank you for creating a chemical creating a code out of nothing but chemicals with no actual engaging in purely naturalistic mechanisms in order to manifest. And the whole challenge is based around the idea of the acceptance of the paradigm that this indeed did manifest purely through naturalistic mechanisms. And in the effort, in the desperation to cling to the idea that this is in fact that which comports to reality, they completely disqualify and eliminate the people who maybe will look at it from a different paradigm, that it was actually created, was actually encoded, and therefore will go searching for answers to try and solve it with the correct understanding of what it actually is. So here in atheism, forcing the naturalistic paradigm into the discovery of the origins and synthesis of the genetic code is immediately demanding disqualification of any research paradigm that will adopt theism as a core component because of their desperation to be correct. And in doing so, I think potentially slow down the path of discovery and the benefit of mankind in their desperation to cling to and state that we can only search for answers inside their scientific paradigm. I think we have a bit of a problem there with that. What do you think, Maddox?
Well, no, I would completely agree with that, and I think that kind of case in point to what you're talking about. We've got the one and only idiot of all, one of the top YouTube atheist idiots, Iron Charioteer. The Bible says you only need one way to assess reality, and that's faith. You are blaspheming if you use logic and inquiry.
Wow, what a doublet.
That, I mean, that may be a personification of the puppet that I was referring to, and in relation to this stream, it's like that is. I mean, how many times? I know I have. I know you have. How many have people have talked about the whole? What is the actual meaning of pistis? Right. The people don't want to talk about
Greek word. The Greek word for faith. We translated to faith. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like. I don't, and I've gone on many tangents about this in my streams. Of like, part of the reason that I do not regret, nor would I change my brush with death and the utter paradigm shift in my life, is that if I had not had that experience, I wouldn't, and if I hadn't been left with my cognitive capacity, I would not have shifted my mental focus from the strictly material, make a bunch of money standpoint towards hey, that's still an important facet of like this time in my life or time of my experience and my existence, more specifically. But the curiosity for understanding the fundamentals of my existence wouldn't have dramatically accelerated. But beyond all that, in context of the questioning my very existence and looking for the fundamental reasons to have confidence in, is there something beyond this plane? I wouldn't have gone searching for that at the level that I have, anyway. At least not at this stage of my life, and wouldn't have found answers and become even more curious and more astounded and more open to way deeper and more substantive explanations for my very existence that are not based on blind faith. I honestly crack up when I hear that, and that point made by the atheist, I'm operating from a blind faith perspective. Like, you have no idea. You have no idea how the direct antithesis of that position is my actual reality. And I don't know.
Well, if the idea is that you have faith because you operate off of inferences, well, good. So do you, atheist. So what's the problem? And the idea is the incorrect idea of what faith even is or how it functions in the philosophy of man. Like you even have to have faith that you're not living in a solipsist universe. Solipsist universe where basically you're just in the matrix. You have to, at least, in order to be a sentient thinking agent, believing that anything you do has any physical value at all, have to take faith that you don't exist in that type of universe. So, I mean, the atheist, even at a very basic level of reasoning, has to rely upon some type of a priori or axiomatic justification for their reality. They're not any better off than us, and they believe in their naturalistic paradigm through inferences that they accept and fill the gap of knowledge with faith. Now, an Iron Charioteer is particularly one of the more unintelligent and definitely misinformed individuals I've ever come across. So he's operating with a bad framework right off the bat. But, you know, the thing of the matter is the denialism, the desperation of the denialism to have such strong opinions about something that you so clearly know so little about. Like this is what insane people do.
Well, I would agree with that. The insane / desperate for avoidance of the underlying premise that we were talking about earlier, and that is the accountability factor. And if that is the case, then it is not unreasonable to try and perform incredible Olympic gold medal worthy mental gymnastics to circumvent the rational the rational conclusion. And you know, one of the points that was made a minute ago by somebody, let's see, talking about pastors. No, Iron Charioteer, your pastor says not to question your faith. Okay, so one of the underlying issues that I have with the quote-unquote modern church is, and this guy starts in Catholicism too, but this whole premise that there is a singular individual in a church who is the, you know, endowed entity, somehow is not, you know, more than just a normal human in relation to the potential understanding of existence, God, Christianity, the relationship with, and so on. It's like somehow they act like we're supposed to treat this individual as, you know, the replacement for or the stand-in for God himself. Oh wait, that's what the Catholics do, and there's so many recognized problems with that model. And oh wait, I personally categorically reject that premise. So, and I think the scriptures also reject it in the fact that it claims that we are all priests and we are all able to commune with God now. We are no longer separated and in need of that sort of mediation because we now have Christ as the mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And it's I don't know, it's like that concept either they're unaware of, it goes over their head, or they categorically refuse to contemplate that premise and, you know, that doctrinal position. But in fairness to them, modern churches have, in my opinion, completely rejected a fundamental component of Scripture, and then wonder why there's all these negative ramifications, because it's natural for humans to, whether they mean to or it's, you know, just an unconscious result, do start to place faith in people, quote unquote faith in people we endow with leadership roles.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually really spot on, Maddox. In fact, I feel that part of the suffering we have in our culture is because the church itself, and not the church itself. When I say the church itself, I'm talking about like the body of Christ, but like the churches that have sprung up everywhere have almost like betrayed a bit of trust to like almost the common public. Like there's so much talk of embezzlement, you know, pedophilia, you know, predation, theft, robbery. I mean, you know, everything under the sun, sexual immorality. There's all this stuff that is just kind of rampant inside the institutions themselves. And there seems to be little to almost no corrective measures being taken place in the actual body of Christ to call it out, eliminate it, you know, put it where it belongs. And so, yeah, I think there's been an extra toxic layer and effect. And I think you just nailed it, that like common Christians, even God-fearing ones, have felt like they can't really even trust, you know, an institution, a brick and mortar institution, to go in and commune. There's almost been a sense of a betrayal of trust collectively because of the individual actions of so many of these institutions claiming Christ, and so many people that will still validate them even when they're blatantly not. It's yeah, man, I think you nailed it. I agree with you completely, 100%.
Well, in extenuation of that, one of the other points that I find extremely frustrating is, if somebody asks, what do you believe in, right? And you say, oh, I'm a Christian. I would say 9 times out of 10, I mean, not as much necessarily in conversations online, but like in person, oh, okay, cool, but like, what are you? Right? If you say, I'm a Christian, well, what are you? And what is been ingrained in Western culture, at least, that you're a Baptist, or you're a Catholic, or you're a Presbyterian, or you're a Methodist, or you're a insert whatever. And it's almost as if that has taken the predominant position rather than I am a Christian first. Then you might be the underlier, right? And I think this just, I joke about this sometimes, but I feel like the denominations were the original iteration of identity politics. And now, we're seeing it in, so many other different facets of modern society. But it's like, so I'm not supposed to even look for things that we have in common, or we can agree upon, or at a minimum, not necessarily make you my enemy, right? Like we don't have to get along. We don't necessarily have to spend a bunch of time together, but there's a major difference between that and like full scale, I'm going to treat you like I would the Satanist, right? Like there's differences in that context. But part of the reason I'm saying this more in the context of the denominational conflicts, what I'm talking about right now. And I'm like, you do realize the whole reason that we have all these splits is that nobody wanted to actually see if we could figure out the actual answers, right? It was my way or the highway, right? In so many different contexts. Now, I'm not suggesting that there weren't justified splits in the aspects of like for different things. I'm talking about like what was the root cause of not actually finding the answer.
Right? And that's actually
not the end. Again, I'm not bashing the end outcome. I'm talking about the root.
No. I get what you're saying, and I in fact that's exactly where my thinking was going while you were talking. It's like it to me, the manifestation of the denominations, and I've always said this, and I think we'd all agree with this. It's a man-made construct. It's not 100%. Really biblical, but it was a man-made construct to try to answer a spiritual problem. And the spiritual problem was heretics, false prophets, false teachers, you could have like a church and you could be like, oh, we're all Christian here. And then you find out a couple of them are like, yeah, we're Christian. We believe Christ, was a true prophet. And so was Muhammad. Like, oh, crap, we have a problem. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. Like, it seems like it was it was man trying to do their best to answer the problem of like, spiritual perversion or deviation or things that were potentially dangerous, and not necessarily it was the best way. And I think what's happened is that what maybe started off as a good thing with good ideas, like everyone could say, like the Reformation, during the 1500s was ultimately a good thing, breaking the back of power of a lot that the Catholic Church had over the people, which particularly in Germany was literally just fleecing them, like trying to basically, stick them up for money to get their loved ones from suffering in the pit type thing, and Luther was disgusted by it. So like you could look at it in the context of the time and say like that was great. But just like you said, Maddox, and that's a beautiful point, you kind of have to track it back down to like its source. Like, why did this even really happen? And once we find out why it happened, is it something we even really still need? Or has it become something that's now been abused and manipulated in the culture for evil means? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would agree with you that it's being completely manipulated for evil means at this point. I mean, and personally, I think if you look at it from an eschatology perspective, if anybody thinks that we're not in the era of Laodicea, they're an ignorant idiot, in my opinion. Like, what greater embodiment of that concept is there than modern quote unquote church? I mean, it's it is that, and then and I've even the acceleration of that in my lifetime. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and then we're hearing people, preachers talking about, reading. I've read Revelation many times myself. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by it. It was prophecy in general, but different sermons on the topic and such. And at the time, I didn't really comprehend that premise, right? Because I was surrounded by people who, for all intents and purposes, were pretty, very active, right? Not just, I mean, there were some, but the majority, at least the ones that I was interacting with inside of my family and church, that were pretty genuine folks, right? Out doing good stuff. But there also, the church I was going to was directly against the whole premise of the individual human leader, right? It was more of the the concept was called the Brethren, but the Plymouth Brethren, I think was the term, but not having the quote unquote pastor, right? Everybody was able to engage and such. Anyway, as I've gotten older now, and I look back and just what I've observed in my own lifetime of the complete and utter degradation and the scandals, right, that are coming out. I remember like in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, there were scandals that came out, right? But they were much more rare, right? Now it's like every week. And obviously some of this has to do with, the increasing communication level, but there's a lot of just blatant corruption going on. And a lot of it's not even being hidden anymore. And then when you look at the dramatic differentiation in the televangelists, for example, right? Like, let's get real. Back in the 80s, the Franklin or the Billy Graham era, like, might have some aspects of the televangelism going on, but preaching the gospel, by Jove, right? And now a lot of the stuff you see on TV that's supposedly, Christian, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, so at some point, is this guy actually gonna say anything that's not a bunch of flowery, like, feel good, motivational speaking stuff? Because I haven't heard anything, except maybe the occasional allusion to a concept. But the vast majority of this is absolutely nothing to do with Christianity or Scripture at all. And then we're wondering why, number one, people aren't, seeing the big picture or being able to, understand what's actually going on. Have massive misconceptions about what somebody like myself believes. And then third, when the corruption happens, somehow equates the lack of delineation and the nebulousness of what was being they're perceiving as Christianity as somehow being equal to nothing but a cover for potential corruption. And the fact that isn't obvious to a lot of people just continues to blow my mind on a daily basis. I don't know if that all makes sense.
Yeah, no, spot on, man. I'm right there with you. Hey, I gotta run. I gotta bow out. I appreciate you having me on, man. Good stuff. By the way, my channel's back up. That strike came down.
Oh, nice.
From TOG. I guess YouTube finally got to it. So I'm streaming again on my channel. So awesome.
What did you get a strike
shout out,
for?
man. TOG was being a disingenuous, perjurous little scumbag, but we've all dealt with that and brought it full circle. So we're trying to just move on. So yeah, but anyway, YouTube's broken. YouTube is a giant steaming pile of liberal communist garbage. So keep that in mind. Be aware of your content creators and go follow them on multiple platforms, because you never know. Someday they might just freaking disappear and you won't know what happened. So keep that in mind. All right, guys. God bless. Have a great day. Thanks, Maddox. Appreciate it, man. Take care.
No problem. Yeah, I'm glad you're back up. So in line with that, Martin, you got anything you want to say? Because I just realized that Otangelo and Sal are having a discussion, DNA and beyond.
Yeah, but I think it's a rerun. Like they already had that discussion. It's just showing it again.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, is this from the God Talk today? Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to share like more evidence for Creator. Like, the code is awesome. The programming code in DNA is awesome. But there's even more evidence. Like scientists have found like there's design strategies in that code, like automatic error correction, files within folders, data encryption. All of that further points to intelligence. It's like someone has figured these things out way before us. And then there's nanomolecular machines in the cells that carry out the commands written in that code, and they work together in like a factories format, working together to achieve a common goal. And then those nanomachines make even a bigger factory that, like your liver, it has like 500 functions and produces like a crazy amount of things that you need. So it's just it's just stupid to say no. These things are not evidence for intelligence.
Well, I would completely agree with you. And the your point that you're making there. I mean, I've read papers too on like the error correction mechanisms and such, and how they're doing direct comparison to the efficiency of the error correction in relation to the best human created error correction codes. It's like, oh wait, turns out these are better than ours, kind of thing. And it's, when you really think about that, and to your point on like the nanomachines, and I was actually thinking about this in relation to
It's jungle.
Jungle's outside, man. What's going on?
Well,
Have you expanded the beard a little bit? The beard's getting a little bushier than it was last time I saw you.
I'm waiting for the electric chainsaw to heat up so I can cut some lumber, some wood.
Oh, nice. You on the lakeside, huh?
Well, it's just my my forest, whatever.
Yeah, so you got to Tony. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, man? I think your conversation with Doc Savage pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, that was a fun one. I was but Mark, is it Martin or Martin?
Martin.
Call
me whatever.
I don't pronounce your name properly. The point you were making on the the systems within systems, like it's a great analogy. I heard about this was like the Russian dolls concept, right? And you got the doll within the doll within the doll, and when you think about the different interdependent components of life form, even the most simple forms of life, you've got the embodiment, the personification, the realization of the dolls within dolls concept, but in a practical manner of mechanical efficiency and information technology and robotics and communication systems and everything else that, and this kind of the point I was making earlier about like until relatively recently, we hadn't developed anything to the extent to even know what to look for in the biological system. And I mean, let's get real. Until we even knew about proteins, the concept of molecular machines we never even thought about that. Or if we did, it was just like a sci-fi writer of like, oh man, if I could shrink down to this size, it'd be really cool. Think about all the cool stuff I could do, right? But that was a sci-fi. It wasn't actually a plausible, this might actually be, a achievable objective. But what are we doing now? We're attempting, and successfully in some cases, to create our own molecular robots.
Yeah, but they cheat. They copy a lot of stuff from God's programming code, and then they think they made one from scratch.
Well, true, very true. But the point I make is like we didn't even know to look for that, right? And let alone.
And what is that simulating? They doing that is simulating intelligence, putting those things in order, that programming code to make a robot. So it's just simulating the initial process.
Yeah, using intelligent design.
Yes.
But then they go back and say that the first cells didn't need proteins or DNA or anything.
Yeah, they're like, give me this one miracle of life coming from non-life, and I'll explain the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best they can do is actually, if you look up some of the latest research, they can get 14 amino acids to hook together. Wow.
With help.
with templates, and they have to be all purified and left-handed.
Well, here's the thing that I find interesting in terms of like, is something plausible, right? So they talk about how like, oh, well, it's the point you're just making of, well, just give me a life form and then everything's fine. I'm like, okay, cool. So is there any scenario if there's just dirt and chemicals, do you think it is ever like, I care less about how much time you have in the equation. Is there any scenario in which you're going to manage, you're somehow, some non-intelligent agent is not in the equation, somehow you make it to the moon?
Right.
Like, is the shuttle going to form itself and somehow blast off to the moon? Like, is that plausible? I mean, I would assume that nobody's actually going to say yes, that's plausible. So, and if they do say that's plausible, then you just have to look at them like, okay, you're an idiot. So, I question your intelligence at that point. Danny, what's going on, man? Welcome to the impromptu stream.
Man,
How
I
you
felt
doing?
so stupid. You premiered. Why did you do this to me, LPP? You premiered a video yesterday, and like an idiot, I thought I was live and I was like asking for the link and stuff, and I felt very ignored. And like, I'm like, what is going on? And how are all these people here at the same time? And why do everybody has like different icons? And why are people more friendly than? I was like so confused, and then I realized it was recorded.
Were you mad at me? Were you mad at me, Danny? Did you feel insulted?
No, I was mad at myself for being.
No. I mean, when you weren't getting a link to join.
Oh no, I wouldn't be mad about that.
No, that one was so. Standing for Truth has been bugging me for like a month to post that, and I finally got around to it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna upload it and just schedule it to go, because I had a bunch of stuff I was doing yesterday. So I was like, I was driving when it premiered. I was like answering a few people's questions and talking to folks while I was driving, which is bad. And then finally I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So I apologize for that. But anyway, that's good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us. And I have to say that like in all instances, most things deserve a caveat, and I do not equate Danny as a puppet. I don't think he has yet become a real boy, but he is he has cut the strings and is the wooden version of Pinocchio at this point.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
And Geppetto, who's Geppetto? Who's Geppetto are you?
So, Danny, do you have any new streams coming out? I like what you did with your branding and your little character for. I'm talking about like, your channel graphics and such.
Yeah. I'm doing 2 book things. One, philosophy of math, which no one's really interested in, but I'm doing that more for my benefit. And then I think people will be interested in the soul. So I think that the next episode is going to be a lot more technical and interesting in terms of how the soul is fleshed out in the various views. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to do a video on God's omniscience and free will. I think I'm going to do that. I also spoke with Lawrence Krauss for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going to analyze that clip rather than just putting it out.
Okay, so was this at the same time as the Darth Dawkins?
It was right before. So
okay.
There are like 3 or 4 people that spoke with him, and I was overshadowed by Darth's conversation. But yeah, I did speak with him for a few minutes.
Okay, so here's a serious question. I'm assuming you listened to the whole thing with Darth Dawkins.
Yes.
How many times was brute facts brought up?
I don't remember, but I don't know. Wait, was from Krauss?
No, from Dawkins.
I forgot, man. I tuned it out. I just don't enjoy listening to Darth, to be honest.
Well, usually Darth goes, at least in the debates of his that I've listened to, usually it's like question, and then like, do you believe in brute fact? question. So we're talking about brute fact. It's usually where it
ends up.
Yeah.
I did a little video on presuppositional apologetics because I'm very anti But I explained it why I think it's problematic. But it's only 3 minutes, so.
So before I forget about this, so I know you observed part of the cause of this particular stream, which was the boy versus standing for truth debate. What were your thoughts on that madness?
On the video that I thought was live, but wasn't that?
No. I'm talking about the other night. The guy that was going on about ontological mathematics over on.
Oh my gosh, he didn't know what he was talking about. It was very hard to listen to. He didn't know what the principle of sufficient reason was. That's not the way he used it. Was not right. The principle of sufficient reason is that for every fact, there's some explanation for it. That's all that is. Down to it. So basically, the idea is that on the principle of sufficient reason, there can't be any contingent facts. That all facts are grounded in some ultimate necessary fact or something like that. But that it has nothing to do with justification, like having good reasons to believe in God or not believing in God. It has nothing to do with that. So he didn't know what he didn't know. He just didn't know anything. I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, it was interesting. The ongoing discussion about that was continued in comments after the fact. I got so irritated today. I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna do a stream and invite these guys to come on and talk. So, by the way, I bought the book last night. I've been reading it. He was going on about the ontological. Well, I knew I was aware of the concept, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this just to be like, see how weird this is. So in their section, this is the section from the principle of sufficient reason from the book, right? This is the one master axiom of the entire system. The principle of sufficient reason has been defined by many different philosophers in different ways. We define it in a very specific way, which is for everything that exists, there exists a sufficient reason for why it is thus and not otherwise.
Yeah, well, that there's a problem with that.
And then they have a slightly expanded version of it, which is they're attributing to Godfrey Leibniz.
Leibniz. Yeah,
Leibniz. For everything that exists, there must exist a sufficient reason for why it is the way that it is, rather than a different way.
Have you heard of the contingency argument for God?
I have, yeah. If there is no sufficient reason to prevent something from existing, then it must exist. That's the they're referring to. Yes, I am familiar with the contingency argument.
Yeah, Leibniz came up with the contingency argument, and the only way that argument works is if the principle of sufficient reason, which we just say in philosophy PSR, if the PSR is true. There's no such thing as the contingency argument if there's no PSR. But essentially, like I don't know what direction you wanted to talk, what direction you wanted the conversation to go, but. Yeah, I mean, the PSR is taken seriously in literature. It's like there's a big question about whether you should hold to the PSR. But one of the responses of the PSR is that it only allows for one possibility of how the world could have been, right? So there's a view called necessitarianism, which is a view that there's only one possibility. And I think that a lot of criticism of the PSR is that basically is something like if you hold to the PSR, then there's only one possible world, something like that.
Well, but I would say if you hold to the PSR, then you also have to substantiate the cause of that necessity.
Well, necessary facts are usually going to be true no matter what conditions. Like, so God is necessary. It's like something like in every world God exists despite any other facts, right? So if it's the case that God's existence kind of, I'm going to use this word loosely, depends on something else, then if that something else wasn't in place, then God wouldn't exist. But that's not possible because he's necessary. So
Right.
like the point is that a necessary fact there's not, it's usually going to be some kind of fact that doesn't really depend on any other fact. But I don't know if that's totally true. I have to think about it. But
Well, and a sidebar, I'm thinking about that. I was applying that a little bit more in relation to, actually much more in relation to our existence, right, versus the existence of God specifically. And this is one of the things that I always find interesting in the philosophical debates, right? And I find it very ironic that many of the YouTube atheists, anyway, case in point, the Jack character, who, when we were talking about abiogenesis, he was refusing to address whether or not, like, if you eliminate undirected chemical process being able to account for abiogenesis, then is intelligent agent the correct assumption, or the rational conclusion, right? And he was immediately like, well, that doesn't prove God. I'm like, that's not what I asked. We're talking about is an intelligent agent required? Not necessarily God in this context, but is there one required? Of course, refused to accept it. Did a full-scale jump to God. Same thing applies to who created God? Well, if we were created, then who created God? Right? Those kind, who designed the designer arguments. And I find those very, interesting from a theoretical perspective, but from a practical application, I view them as a dramatic dodge.
But those are people that don't understand what infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite potential is. Well, infinite wisdom.
I would agree with your point there, Jungle, but also from a whether
only
or
if it's
not
a multiverse. If it's an infinite multiverse, they don't have a problem with that.
Right. A physical God, they don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
Well, that's fair. But in the context of whether or not it is the rational conclusion that we were and our existence was created is not dependent on whether or not the entity that created us did or did not have his own creator, right? Like, that is irrelevant, in my opinion. Like, you can go down that path and substantiate everything else, but I'm saying in the context of whether or not it is the rational conclusion that we had a creator is not dependent on whether or not God had a creator, right?
No, you're right. You're right about that.
And a lot of people have talked about this concept, and I apply it, and other people have as well, but you apply this to the computer game concept of just because there's different, and Bob's talked about this, but I've talked many times, of you create the video game, I'm external to the video game, I can have a timeline perpetuate inside of the game at a dramatically accelerated rate. Now, if you were inside the game from your relative perspective, a whole massive amount of time has passed. From the external perspective as the creator, 3 days did, or a week, or a month, or a year, whatever. But that has zero bearing on what, and even if ultimately I will die as the creator of the game, it has zero bearing on whether or not I created the game in the first place. And I was myself, or an entity like me, was a necessity for the game to exist. And that whole piece to me of like why that becomes such a supposed debunk position, to me, just showcases an extraordinarily myopic perspective and or a refusal to consider things from a much bigger picture than, in my opinion, a very narrow-minded one. Does that make sense? And Danny, I'd love your opinion on that premise I was put forth.
If you're the creator of the game, did you lose anything?
Right.
Yeah, there's a general response, but I don't know how. I guess like what you're saying is something like you're asking if something. Let me make sure I understand. So something like you would think that something like a code or DNA requires an agent, and then you feel like they change the subject when they ask questions about, well, what brought about God? What explains God's existence or something, right? Something like that?
Well, in that example, yes. It's like why does the origination of the necessary entity have anything to do with whether or not for this to exist, there wasn't one required? and that's being the rational conclusion.
Yeah, you still have a creator regardless.
You're making a jump, a two-step jump, and not accounting for the intermediary. And
it seems like if you're asking about how God would be necessary or whether God was created, that doesn't seem like it's going to address your claim, I guess, or that's what I mean. Maybe I'm misinterpreting.
That is the point I'm making, and but I'm asking you, and the reason I'm asking to bring this up is that it is I would say it is probably the number one uninformed YouTube atheist response and I know you've heard it, like, who designed the designer? Who designed the designer?
Oh yeah,
it's a very standard talking point, and I'm like, you idiot, you're not actually addressing the real question at this time.
It's a way to avoid the fact that you have a maker, a creator.
And to me, it's like it goes back to the whole point of, to dumb it down, of you see a badass Ferrari, right? And you're like, holy crap, look at that thing. And you're awing at how badass it is. And then you're like, man, I wonder who the team was that designed this Ferrari. And then you say, it doesn't matter because we don't know who the parents of those guys were. So therefore, and it's like, so are you suggesting that the team that designed the Ferrari doesn't exist because I can't tell you who their parents were? Like, you would be considered a freaking moron if you took that position from an adamant perspective. Like, no, they do not exist, and they are not required because you can't tell me when, where, and who their parents were in relation to their existence. Like, I mean, you'd be like, what?
That's a good example.
That's dumb.
Actually,
I would laugh you out of the room and be like, yeah, you're an idiot. See ya. And it has absolutely nothing to do with it being the inference of the best explanation that, it does have designers. And
even the elements of the universe are working parts.
I'm not gonna challenge that particular point, but I want to present a challenge to you. Okay. So I'm going to push back a little bit. Do you think that minds are highly complex, similar to DNA?
Do I believe what? Say again.
Do you think minds are very complex, like DNA?
The DNA made the mind.
Okay, so there's nuance here. I want to make sure I'm completely understanding. So are you asking me if the DNA made the mind, or if the DNA is a result of the mind? What's your...
I guess, okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say is something like, you want to look at DNA and say, well, it's obviously designed, and you have a list of reasons for why. And I'm just asking, do you think that when you examine the mind, that those same list of reasons for come up in terms of it demanding a designer as well? So like, that's to say, can we appeal to a set of reasons for why the mind needs to have a designer?
Yes.
Okay. So then that means that God's mind, which does not have a designer, has to be different in a way where it's not like ours, such that it wouldn't need a designer, right? Because my mind is complex, right? It's very complicated. God's mind is very complicated, but they're different in a way where one requires a designer and the other one doesn't.
Okay, so twofold, two responses to that. Number one would be that is just a different spin on the original point that I was making, which is trying to jump one step to, well, how does who are the parents of the designer? Like, that's all it is. Just in this context, we're talking about minds.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is that if it's possible, right now, so maybe you're saying that, look, the probable inference here is that your mind has been designed. I can grant that for sake of argument. But I mean, I'm inclined. I think that the mind is even more spooky than DNA.
Right, you're right. Yeah.
Well, no, I would agree with you 100%.
Yeah, the mind. But I think there's some arguments to show why there can't be a naturalistic theory of the mind. Okay, so that's very.
And I would agree with that too.
Right. So now, the thing is that we know that it's possible for there to be a mind with no designer, because God is a mind with no designer. So if the atheist says, well, our minds are just like God's minds in the sense that they don't require a designer, I'm not so sure what the response is to that.
No, there's a difference.
Yeah,
If
God
your
would be
mind has
infinite.
always existed, then you don't need a designer. Okay, even atheists know that. They always said in the past that the universe has always existed, because then it would be very good evidence that there's no creator. Your mind has not always existed, so you need a cause of that.
Yeah, this is a good point, right? You're just saying something like, the fact that my mind began to exist lends probability to the fact that something caused it to exist, right? And
Sure.
now, if there's no unified theory of the mind,
You broke up or something? Was it
That's
just
just
created
yeah.
my mind,
Okay,
because
Danny,
it
you,
began.
Danny,
Whereas
okay,
God's
what,
mind,
Danny,
you're
what's the
saying that the only reason why
Danny?
it
I didn't
wasn't
hear
designed
what
is
you
because
said.
it's always
Sorry.
been there. Okay.
Danny,
But that
you
means
broke up,
that
man.
if
We missed
God
part of
is
it.
not necessary,
Danny.
Then you broke up.
oh, did I break up? Is
Yeah,
this okay?
start over. Start over.
We lost you. You like faded out, and then we've been like, Danny. I don't think you heard us.
Where did I leave off?
Let's see.
Start over. Just start over.
Okay, so no, I do agree that there's something there, right? Like the fact that my mind was brought into existence and God's wasn't, means that it's the feature of necessity that makes it such that God has no designer, right? But the fact that my mind began to exist, there might be a question about, since there can't be a unified theory of the mind, right? That we might think that there's some intentional explanation for why I have a mind. Okay. No, I do understand that. But the point, I guess this is not a rebuttal, but so much something to think about, that it seems like it's the nature of necessity that makes it such that something can't have a designer, not some property of the mind itself. Right. I think that's,
No, I just think if something is eternal, it doesn't need a cause.
no,
So,
I agreed with you.
Simple as
I agreed
that.
with you.
simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
It sounds like a giant word salad, man. And
Okay.
and by the way, what started the multiverse? What is the universe generating mechanism of the multiverse?
Well, I don't hold to a multiverse view.
But that's more likely than a creator, right?
I don't make that claim.
Many atheists do. So
Yeah, you're talking to a different kind of atheist.
Daniel, you're atheist.
I think it just has a problem with the perfection of God.
I just want to
I'm
make
not
sure.
sure.
Is Daniel atheist?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Danny then, has he ever in his life seen evidence for an intelligent creator of the universe and of us, or has he never seen in his life evidence for it?
Well, you're not going to like my answer, but no one's going to like my answer, but it's going to sound crazy, but I don't think there can be evidence for a mind. But that's my view. So
Why can't there be evidence?
Because physical facts will underdetermine mental facts, essentially.
Well, then why don't molecules move towards life naturally? Why don't molecules self-assemble into life?
I think he's talking about the mind that is not physical.
Wait, why? What's your question, Tony?
I'm saying you're saying that there's no way we could prove a mind, right? For the origin of the universe.
Well, not exactly. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there can't be evidence for a mind.
How can there not be evidence for intelligence?
You having a mind is not evidence?
Right.
No, having a mind is not evidence that there are other minds.
Right, but don't intelligent minds design things all the time?
Well, all the physical well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you could say that minds are intelligent. I'm not going to dispute that.
Yeah.
Well, the same cause of
for the
my
universe.
mind.
What follows from that, though, Tony?
What causes other
the whole
people's
universe itself, man, and genetic code.
Well, that I don't understand the inference.
Don't other people have DNA?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
First
other bodies have DNA. I'm not disputing that either.
That make the same mind?
I don't think DNA makes minds.
Well, it's
It makes
accesses.
brains.
It's the starting blueprint.
It accesses
I don't think
the
so.
mind.
No, I don't
If
think there
it-
can be a unified theory of mind.
If it's the non-physical mind that you're thinking of, the mind that we have, the brain that we have, has access to the mind, your mind.
No, I believe I have a mind, but I'm saying that the way I come to know that there are other minds is not via evidence.
Then how do you do it?
Well,
Apart
yeah, I
from
mean,
evidence.
exactly. How
Everybody-
would you conclude that something isn't designed? How do you know with certainty?
Everybody has the
How do I know
DNA.
something isn't
It's the
designed?
same DNA that makes you and me.
Right.
You know,
Well, I don't.
that's the
Like I
genetic
said, I don't
blueprint.
think. Yeah, I don't think DNA has anything to do with there being a mind.
Well,
Why
could a
not?
house build itself, Danny? Could a house construct itself, even if I gave you
That'd be
all the parts?
contradictory.
No, if I gave you all the parts to a house, could it self-assemble in any environment?
No. His
No,
statement was like claiming that the programming code in a computer doesn't require mind.
Right, right. Well, same
No,
thing.
that's
You
not.
can
That's not what I
compare.
said. That's not what I
You
said.
said
I
the
said
DNA code doesn't require mind. It's programming code.
no. What I'm saying is that DNA wouldn't produce a mind.
Yeah,
well,
well,
but it
read
has
itself.
access.
Danny, the point he's making, that Martin's making, is that it may not produce the mind, but it requires a mind to exist.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because-
That's
I
what we're
know. I
saying.
know that's
Because
yeah, but
when because when we have a
I
mind,
only have 30 minutes.
when we have a mind, we have access to the spirits of God, which is wisdom, understanding, counsel, force, strength, determination, and knowledge, and expectation, good expectation. All these things are the result of what the mind has access to, all these different spirits. I mean, the brain. The brain has
Yeah.
access to all those spirits, which make up the mind.
So Danny, are you suggesting that because DNA does not produce the mind, it cannot be used as evidence for the necessity of one?
Well, I don't think, like I said, so the quick response is, yeah, that's my view. But I think that there can't be any evidence for any mind. I don't think that makes sense to me.
So hang on, guys. So you don't think there's evidence for your own mind?
No.
Your own mind? You don't even think you...
Wow.
No.
So-
Skepticism, man.
Man,
Silly
this is-
skepticism.
A mind,
so-
a mind is made up of the spirits that you listen to, whether true or false.
But there's nuance to that. Let me explain. I come to know my mind not by evidence, but by access. Right? You don't
Access is evidence.
no, not classically speaking, no. Evidence is what
Why
you
is
would
it not
expect on a
evidence?
given.
If you have access to something, why can't it count as evidence?
Well,
If you
you
have
and I
access
just
to a computer, why can't it count as evidence for the
you and I
computer?
you and I just mean something different by evidence, I suppose.
What's your definition of evidence? Let me hear
Something you
this
would
biased
expect on a
definition.
given hypothesis, I think, something like that.
What?
Something you would expect on a given hypothesis.
No, that's not the definition of evidence.
Well, then I'll just use your definition then. What I don't know what you mean.
Just
then.
go on the internet and type in evidence, and you'll see there's
That's what you
thousands
mean
of
by
different
evidence?
kinds of evidence. You get different kinds, but which fall under the umbrella of evidence.
Look, you're telling me that I can understand your definition of evidence by appealing to Google's definition?
It's you get different kinds of evidence. You get like document evidence, you get video evidence, you get audio evidence, you get all kinds of evidence.
Yeah, that
but
works
there's
with
an
my, I
umbrella
think that
term
works
called-
with my definition.
what did you say?
That works with my definition, I think.
What's your definition of evidence?
What you would expect to observe given a hypothesis or an explanation.
Okay,
Danny,
well,
if we-
evidence,
Danny, if
evidence
we
actually means the body of facts and information indicating whether a belief or position is true or valid.
And many times it's not what you expect.
That seems like just to mean justification or something.
Because most of the time in physics and astronomy, it's not what they expect, but it's evidence.
Danny, I think you have a biased definition of evidence.
I'm just using the definition that I use. It's technical in philosophy, you know.
Okay, so what kind of evidence would you allow in court?
What would kind of
Only
evidence?
that.
What? Sorry.
What kinds of evidence would you allow in court, in a court case?
What you expect or what you don't expect?
What would I expect if there were a code?
No.
In
What
court.
would you
Code.
allow
DNA
in
is a
court?
code.
Sorry,
In,
speaking at once.
in court, what kind of evidence would you permit?
I guess what I expected to observe, given something to be true.
What if it's evidence you don't expect?
Well, then it's just not evidence.
No, but it's
Nah,
evidence.
because you've determined it isn't. This is like the movie Expelled, with Ben Stein. This is what the scientists will only accept.
That's so illogical, Danny. I'm surprised.
You have an argument for why it's illogical?
An argument
I
for what?
think the big problem is the bias. There's huge biases, and so if you ask an atheist, any atheist, what is his definition of evidence, then he'll give you like a super biased definition, so that you can throw away all the evidence that you're going to provide.
Right? They just
Well, I'm fine with
dismiss it.
using your definition.
For evidence. Evidence is data.
Information?
It's data, and then you interpret the data, and it might be what you expect, it might be what you don't expect.
It's like asking the definition of an element, and then I tell you there's different kind of elements. So the same way with evidence.
Wait, do you like talking about
different kinds of
semantics?
evidence.
I'm fine with using your definition of evidence, and then I'll respond to your question.
I think data is a good
What evidence do you accept?
definition.
Like, what kind of evidence do you accept
For what?
for anything?
Well, if there was a horse in my room, I would expect there to be some kind of like animal with fur and a ponytail and with hooves and that goes nah. That's what I would.
Like,
That's
say in a court case.
Because that's what
kind
you
of evidence do
expect.
accept?
What if
For
it's an
a code?
animal you never saw before?
well, then I don't know what I would expect.
Then it's
Exactly.
something you
That's what
wouldn't
we're
accept.
saying.
Yeah, that's saying that I don't know what the evidence would be for that. Maybe a heart,
But it's
and
still evidence.
blood and teeth. I don't know.
It's still data.
Yeah,
It's still evidence.
And going back to what John would say about the car, I mean, could a car self-assemble on its own without an engineer and a mechanic?
I think that's. I agree with you. I think that's impossible.
So that needs a mind, correct? That needs a mind for sure.
No, what needs a mind?
The assembly of an automobile.
Any
I
directed
don't
working
see
mechanism.
the logical necessity of that.
Any
So cars
directed
can build themselves.
No, I don't accept that.
any
So
directed
mine-
working mechanism. Yeah.
Right. So a mind is behind cars, right? Engineering automobiles.
Well, that doesn't follow.
That doesn't follow, really. You should tell that to Ford.
Well, I don't accept casusui, the casusui. This self-cause, I think that's contradictory. I think that's what you illustrated.
Self-cause.
So-
You
Hey-
sound like the flat earthers, man. You just
Yeah,
try
this
and
is just
explain away
stupid.
all the evidence and claim
Well,
there is
I don't
no
want to
evidence.
waste y'all's time. So if you're done talking to me, you can just talk about something else.
No, it's fun talking to you because I like hearing all the
So,
excuses.
so,
but,
so Danny, you would go to Ford. You would go to Ford Motor Company and say, "There's no minds engineering any of these automobiles."
No, I wouldn't say that.
No, but you would say that about DNA, right?
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Okay. This is
Oh.
just.
Danny, I just think you should be aware of
You
your
don't?
biases. I think in science, people should be aware of their biases because biases make so much errors, can cause.
What am I
you to-
biased towards?
DNA is so much more complicated than making a Ford.
What am I biased towards?
Danny, Lawrence Krauss says deism is plausible. He has a quote saying that in one of his debates with.
I think Lawrence Krauss is philosophically inept.
Lawrence Krauss is
But
rubbish.
it's funny how he's such a staunch atheist and he admits deism is a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, but then he goes on to say a multiverse generator is more likely, even though he has no evidence for that.
I don't know why you're telling me this. I disagree with a lot of what Krauss says. In
And-
fact, I debated him yesterday or 2 days ago.
And it requires energy. They always forget about the energy required for multiverses and everything. And then it has to be ordered energy. How does it get ordered? It can't order itself. Energy can't make itself. It can't order itself.
All right,
It's got to
so-
be from a non-contingent source.
greater source.
Yeah.
Danny, what I want to say is it's good to be skeptical, but too much skepticism can keep you away from the truth.
I don't know if that. I don't even know if that's true.
Dude,
It's a fact.
do you know if
If you get
abiogenesis can
away
happen? Do you lean towards abiogenesis, correct?
I mean, I don't really think about it very often.
All right.
So Danny, you know you're my favorite YouTube atheist at the moment. I do wonder, though, if you actually intellectually recognize that theism is the correct conclusion, but due to additional variables,
It's
convince yourself to not accept it.
called denial.
And you use your higher than average intellect to substantiate a variety of hypotheticals to enable you to convince yourself that it's rational to not accept that at some level theism is correct.
That's it is.
You should be my therapist or psychologist or something.
Sorry, you broke up there. Say it
You
again.
should be my
Yeah.
therapist. or
Yeah,
something.
you're the psychologist.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, is my assessment categorically false, partially correct, or
Well,
on
if
point?
it were true, it would really bother me for sure. But
Okay.
as far as I'm
So-
aware, I don't feel like I'm
And you're not worried about it?
Hey, guys, hang on. Let Danny
You're
finish.
not worried? He's not worried about it?
Jungle, I'm very interested to hear it. I've been having these thoughts about Danny for a while now, so I'm very interested to hear his response. Continue.
Sorry.
my response to whether I have like ulterior motivations to like accept atheism or something.
Well, not necessarily just accept atheism, but to reject theism.
Well, I mean, I don't really. I don't really know. I think we've talked about this before. That sometimes I try to reflect about where I am in terms of what I take to be the case, and it's hard to remove what you want to be true from like what you think you should be committed to rationally. But I just do my best to examine the arguments, and then I just regurgitate those. But I don't really, I mean, if there's a psychological reason for why I reject theism, that might be interesting. But I don't think that gets in the way of me, and I only do have biases.
Okay, but just be aware of them. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's good to be aware of your biases for sure.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, one of your foundational objections is the problem of evil, right?
Yes, I think that is a problem for me, or for at least philosophically.
Okay. And do you reject the premise that you might be viewing it as a much greater issue due to a atheist worldview?
Oh, like if like the concept. Okay, let me try to understand. You're saying that. Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't really understand.
Okay, so for myself personally, as an example, right? The many of the things that are viewed from another person might be viewed as a horrible scenario, right? And how could this possibly happen? I have been through them, and at the moment in time, I viewed them as horrible, negative, how could this happen, et cetera, et cetera. Now, looking back on them, realize that they were actually beneficial.
Yeah, so
and ultimately where I'm going with all this is to dumb it down, not dumb it down, to like compartmentalize a little more, is the perception of evil, negativity, horrible instances, et cetera, is subject to relativity.
Yeah, so I will say that I'm not moved emotionally by what I perceive in the world, right? So like if I see several starving children, that doesn't move me to like ask the question, why is this happening? In terms of God, right? So where I have a problem with the problem of evil is that, I guess, think of this, right? Any reason that you can offer for what you observe, whatever you may observe, is going to count as a reason to allow that to happen. And so that's another way of saying that it should happen, right? So if going back to what you said in your account of what happened to you, right? When you looked back and saw that it was beneficial, it wasn't evil anymore, right? It was for a reason that happened. So that's basically saying that there is no evil with respect to that event, right? So any event that you perceive, if there's some explanation for why it must happen, then it's just not evil anymore. And so,
well, hang on. Let's go dive a little deeper here, because now in the instance of all the things that happened, I won't go into crazy detail about it, but were there evil actions that were taken towards me during the macro level of the event? Yes. Do I still view some of the things that were done by individuals to me in that context? Were those actions themselves evil? Yes. Now, in the context of the overall arching experience and what I learned from it, and how the actions of those individuals, while they were evil, were a component of it, that doesn't mean that the entirety of the experience was the result of evil. And this is the underlying point that I think oftentimes gets either ignored or isn't really comprehended by a lot of people who have problems with the problem of evil as a conundrum for them. Is it's like, just because somebody did something that was evil doesn't mean that there's always another person who has a result, or thing that has an outcome from the evil action, right?
yeah, okay. So before I am at school, I have to go in 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm not. So you can design the conversation in a way where it makes it look like I'm running away. That's fine. But I do have to say,
I don't never do that to you, Danny.
But no, that's
yeah, we like to make up stories like that.
Yeah, but so I guess you and I agree, right, that on Christianity that there is evil, right? There's some evil.
I mean, I agree that evil exists, yes.
Okay. And so now if God had a reason to allow that, right, then I guess I would ask, how could it still be construed as evil?
Okay, so in the context of, I'm assuming you don't have any kids.
No.
Okay. Do you have any like little brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever, when they were a baby, right? Did you ever observe them doing something that you knew was going to be a negative outcome?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in every single instance, did you run 1,000 miles an hour, run over and scoop them up right before they did it?
I don't think so. Sometimes I found it amusing.
Okay. Some of it's entertainment. You're not going to kill them, right?
I had a hard time with my siblings, but like, go ahead.
But I'm saying in general, like as a parent, right? Like you might watch. It's something like, it might be funny.
Oh, I'm a parent in this case. Okay. Well,
no. You could be a parent. You could be an uncle. I mean, it could be a little. I mean, whatever. Right? You're a responsible entity. Okay, let's put it in that context. And now there's going to be some instances where, like, let's say, for example, you're at a hotel and there's no rail on the balcony, and your 2-year-old is like walking towards the edge, right? You're gonna run over, as a parent or as an uncle or brother, whatever, you're gonna run over and like prevent them from walking off the edge of the balcony of the 12th story or whatever you're on, right? Now, in the context of them walking towards, some toys, and they're gonna trip over one of them, right? Because their shoe's untied. you're probably not necessarily going to go over and like stop this action from happening, right? Same thing, they get a little bit older and they're interacting with another kid, okay? Now, the little kid they're playing with stole one of their toys. And from the baby's, your kid's perspective, that's horrible, it's the worst thing ever. The other kid has done something mean and wrong from taking your kid's toy. You're not necessarily going to prevent that interaction from ever occurring, are you?
Well, no, maybe not me. Yeah, I mean, I might have a reason to do something else or watch it. I don't know.
Well, you might have other reasons, but I'm saying in the context of that example, you're not necessarily going to prevent the quote unquote evil action of the other little kid who stole a toy from your kid. You're not necessarily going to prevent that from ever occurring, are you?
I feel like I agree with you. I don't seems like there's no necessity to it.
Okay, so extrapolate that logic out towards what we're talking about on the macro view. You're now God. There's you and me are the two little kids. And I'm being an asshole to you. Am I necessarily going to prevent that from ever occurring?
Well, that just depends on whether God has a reason to do. If He has a reason, then He'll do it. He'll intervene. So, like, let's just use your example.
No, I'm saying this in the context of why does God allow anything that we view as quote unquote evil to happen, right? And the point I'm making is that you're right. God may have a reason to stop something, okay? But there's and that may put in the context of, just for analogy purposes, the little kid is about to walk off the balcony, right? Versus the two little kids are playing, one stole the other one's toy, okay? We're talking about from a relativity perspective, okay? From the kid's perspective at the moment in time when the other little child stole their toy, that was horrible, tragic. How could this possibly be allowed to happen, right? Now, as an adult, when you had your own kid and you're looking back on it and you're thinking about this premise that we're discussing right now, you're going to chuckle and be like, man, at the moment in time, I thought this was the worst thing. How could this be allowed to happen? And this logic applies to every aspect of our existence. Like every stage of life, there's concepts like what we're describing right now, which can be construed as horrible, right? Now, it may be that part of what made it horrible was the evil actions of somebody else. In this context, the little baby stealing the other one's toy. That doesn't mean that you didn't learn something and there wasn't a potential benefit from a macro point of view. And then if you insert into the equation that we have immortal existence, then from the parent perspective, these things are not nearly as dramatic and quote unquote evil, right, as from our perspective. You follow me?
Yeah, I want to agree with you on the front that it really doesn't matter what I take to be what shouldn't happen or evil. I agree. Okay. What I want to emphasize is the perspective, that the parent perspective, the God perspective, right? And I think what I'm trying to say is that if God thought something shouldn't happen, that means He has a reason to stop it. Unless you think those are two different meanings, right? Like to me, it means the same thing, that if I have a reason to do something, I should do it. In the same way that if God has a reason to do something, He should do it. So from the
well, I mean, technically, I have a reason to not have my kid cry because somebody stole a toy from him.
Well, which reason? But I think what the idea of the good is that it's what you have most reason to do.
No. We're talking about from a practical, real world like concept, not a hypothetical, esoteric logic game. Okay. In the should I ever allow anything bad to ever happen to my child?
Well, I think by definition, no.
So in no context should I allow my child to learn, to engage in their own experience, to have free will. I should lock my 10-year-old daughter, I should lock her into a basement and never allow her to leave the basement, right?
But I thought you were asking, should you ever allow something bad to happen? But then bad means...
No. Should I allow it to occur, or should I make it so that it can never occur?
It being a bad, something
should I
bad.
allow the potential for something bad based on the free will actions of my child? Should I allow potentially for it to happen? Now, again, if they're about to walk off the cliff or the balcony, I'm gonna go smack them up. But if what they're going through is the equivalent of a little kid taking their toy, I may stop it, but I may allow it to occur.
Yeah. So I have 3 minutes. Let me give a quick response, and you can have the last word. Is that fair? Because when that bell rings, I'm not having this conversation when my students come in. So
You're good, right?
okay.
Good.
So I guess the whole puzzle that I have is you and I got to figure out what it means to say to allow something bad to happen, right? If I allow something to happen, on my view, that means that it should happen. Right? And I guess on your view, it means like to allow something bad to happen, that somehow makes sense. And I just have to understand how you make sense of that. And I'll end with this, and you can have the last word.
So it seems to me that you're basically stating that our existence is 100% deterministic. Therefore, God is responsible for allowing anything to happen.
Well, that's a good question. I can't respond, because if I respond, it's going to end up with a back and forth, right? But I would like to talk with you maybe in the future about it sometime.
Okay.
Or do you want an immediate response?
No, we can talk about it in more detail. That's no problem. I guess the point I'm making is and this is the dividing component, is if free will exists, then the entire point I'm making about like the kid and the parent is dramatically different than if there is no free will. And for example purposes, like, okay, daughter in basement, if anything bad happens, it's locked in the basement, right? Daughter, it's the result of throwing anything bad that happens inside the basement is the result of me opening the door and allowing.
I disconnected. I disconnected. That's weird, and there are two of me. Okay, well, LTV, I gotta go, but it was a good conversation. Okay,
absolutely, man. Have a good one. Have a good time teaching.
Yeah, I really don't think the problem of evil is a real good argument. Even Cosmic Skeptic says he doesn't use it because real evil actually points to a creator. So that's why all the atheists claim there is no real evil. Even Richard Dawkins says there is no real evil at bottom. There is no real evil. So if he's going to claim there is evil, then he's actually providing evidence for creator. And I wish I could hear what he would accept as evidence for creator, because it would be probably some ludicrous thing that he would accept, and I'll give him excuses for that evidence, and then he'll probably say no, he wouldn't accept that evidence even. So, but it was fun talking to him.
Yeah, I like Danny. He's much more reasonable and not a jerk like the vast majority of the YouTube atheists. Like, we've had good conversations, and he calls out a lot of the more extreme atheists on a regular basis. Like, he gives them he likes bashing them as much as I do, I think. But the irony is that even the quote unquote nice atheist is there's always that one component that requires a suspension of rationality in order to substantiate their atheist worldview. And in this context, obviously, the problem of evil, and I'm just like, so you believe that the mind exists? Do you think he believes in some semblance of dualism, right? And all these different things. And I'm like, so I kind of made the point at the very end there. I'll have to discuss it with them in more detail. Like, so unless you're completely dependent on determinism, which I don't think he is, then I don't understand how the problem of evil is a problem for him. It's very strange. Jamie, what's going on, man? Welcome to the stream.
Hey. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Is he a compatibilist? Is he seems like he's maybe a compatibilist, like a determinist, but with compatibility? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Danny's been making it a point to be an analyst of things. At least I'm showing in live streams, and kind of been making it a point. He started to open up a little bit recently about his own personal views. He still likes to operate with shields up and be a intellectual, which I get that. I think he's starting to lower his shields a little bit, and like I said, I think he's smart. He's very smart, very, very smart, and I hope that we can reach him, because he would be a very, very solid apologist, no doubt about it, if he was able to open his mind to the truth.
Yeah, and I hope I wasn't too hard on him, because I was trying to kick him a little to wake him up, but I was only doing that because I care about him and want to wake him up. You understand?
Oh yeah, trust me, I've been a complete jerk to him on more than a few occasions. we joke about it, and it's now, Danny, come on now, man. Like, we all know that you're living in fantasy land right now. Yeah, but like I said, overall, he's I like him. But then we've got Jamie over here, who's like, espousing physicalism and all this other stuff, arguing with me over spirit. Jamie, you're on mute if you're responding.
Sorry, I was getting something.
Jamie, ladies and gentlemen, Jamie and I have had an ongoing back and forth about whether or not the spirit is a completely dependent upon the body or can be external to it. It's been good times.
That's an interesting way to phrase it. Like I said, I don't deny that spirits exist, but for God does be spirit. But it really comes
Jamie,
down
are
to
you a 7-day Adventist or?
pretty much.
Because I know they believe that that you can't go out of your body, even though I see Satanists testify that they do it all the time.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say depends on what you mean by that. Like, I mean, yeah, technically you can't leave your body, but you can think you have.
How did you get into 7-day Adventism?
Born.
Okay. Yeah, I think you should test that religion. That prophet, I see a few red flags with that woman prophet. Like I don't know of any great woman prophet in the Bible, and even Paul said that he doesn't allow women to speak in the church, and now suddenly. Suddenly this woman comes and she speaks in the church as though she's from God. And there's a lot of other red flags.
I would say because Ellen White she didn't give any doctrine or any of the foundational teachings of the church. So it's kind of complicated, but I wouldn't think of it as the same kind of thing. So, but people have different opinions on that. I just use the Bible. So,
but the problem is you try and translate the Bible through her eyes. She added like a lot of books to the Bible, and people take that as truth because they say she came from God and she speaks for God. So they claim it's not on par with the Bible, but that's just lie.
Well, I don't use her writings to teach anything or to learn anything. So, but I think she didn't add any books. I mean, they're not considered canon to the Seventh Day Adventists. They're considered kind of like authoritative, yes, I think, but not added to the canon. And so, like I said, she didn't come up with any doctrines. There, if you get into the history, the founders came up with the doctrines from the Bible, and then they claimed she had certain visions and stuff like that confirmed what they were learning or whatever, studying. And so, but she didn't there's a history with all the different doctrines and where the people that brought them to the early Adventists and the groups that accepted certain ones went in certain directions, but yeah, I don't really care about it.
But you know that church was founded on a false prophecy, and then they started making up excuses for why it's not a false prophecy. They called it the Great Disappointment because they said Jesus was coming back some date, and it never happened. And then they start making excuses and doctrines to cover up that great disappointment that they had.
Yeah, the Millerite movement was pretty big, and a lot of people, when that happened, they changed the date, and then when it didn't happen again, that's the Great Disappointment in 1844. But if you look at the prophecies that they were using, it's related to the time prophecies that predicted Jesus coming in Jerusalem in the 1st century. And so, yeah, some people went really crazy with the prophecy not being fulfilled and claimed that Christ returned without, just not physically, stuff like that. That was the Jehovah's Witnesses, how they started. So they have the same. The Adventist just means, the second Advent. So
no, they called it the Adventist because they thought actually she was coming back at that time. Jesus was coming back at that time.
Right.
That's why you call it Seventh-day Adventist.
Right.
And
But
it failed that prophecy. So the church is actually built on a failed prophecy.
I guess
and you were born into that. So what I'm just suggesting is make sure you weren't born into something that has a few lies in it.
That would take a long time to explain. I've definitely looked into it. I left belief for a long time in my life, and it's hard to know how much is indoctrination, how much is.
Okay, see, I thought you're a Seventh-day Adventist. Are you an ex-Seventh-day Adventist or what?
Well, I don't go to Seventh-day Adventist churches, if that's what you mean.
But you sound like you still subscribe to their doctrines.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yep.
So you try and interpret the Bible through their doctrines, their prophetess.
Well, I'm here to study and see if you can show me otherwise. That's what I'm interested in doing.
Okay, that's awesome.
I don't like. I don't want to be indoctrinated. So that's why I like to study with other people, and that's why I'm not just going to that church, and I like to talk to other people because I don't want to. That's like the last thing I want to be is just born into some idea.
I'm really glad to hear that. That's awesome. I'll share some stuff with you if you want later on. I'll share a few Seventh-day Adventist testimonies, high leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist church coming out and realizing red flags, super lot of red flags in that church.
I'm pretty familiar with a lot of that stuff. And that's why I like to just go out in the Bible and just see what's there and see if people have better explanations, because I've reviewed it, and this is where I'm at. I basically started coming back. God pulled me back, I would say, and through a bunch of events similar to kind of like John's story, and that were very significant for me. And so sorry. So when I first started coming back, I was listening to all sorts of different, preachers and different perspectives, but I found myself coming back to my roots, if you will. So, anyways, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, but check out Mormonism. Do you know about Mormonism? They also started the exact same time that she started her church. From the same false prophecy, they started there from the same area, same location, almost same time, and she uses a lot of Mormonism teachings found in Mormonism as well. Her nephew was even married to Joseph Smith or something.
I think that's not quite right. Mormonism, Joseph Smith started the church a couple decades before this whole thing.
Yeah, she copied some of that.
Mormons are quite a bit different. There's some similarities between Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists, basically in their origins, but Jehovah's Witnesses are a lot more non-traditional beliefs, you know.
But you can clearly see Mormonism is false.
Oh, obviously, yeah. But Joseph
Yeah,
Smith died 2 years before the Great Disappointment. He was aware that people were believing in the Millerite movement, but he was shot, I think, in 1842. I've studied with Mormons before. I let them in my house just to see what they have to say. And,
yeah, Seventh-day Adventist is a little bit harder to show someone that it's false, but Mormonism is quite easy, but it's still hard because I've talked to Mormons and they just make excuses for anything, and they also add to the Bible. They add their prophets' books to the Bible, and so whenever the Bible shows a contradiction between their prophet, and then they just reinterpret the Bible.
I get that.
So the same way with the Seventh-day Adventists, what they do is say, Jesus says, "Today you will be in heaven with me." Then they try and push that comma on, because they can't have their prophets saying false things that you have actually a soul that can go to heaven.
You do know that reformers believe that too, right? Like Martin Luther, other people before this. Most of the doctrines were in mainstream Christianity, if you will, Protestant Christianity, here and there. And so, from my perspective, they were just studying from the Bible. And Ellen White didn't proclaim any doctrine like this is true, and then they had to make it so from the Bible. Honestly, if you look into the history, it's a common misunderstanding about the church because it's so closely related with other groups. Martin Luther too believed in annihilationism, and he believed in soul sleep. Nobody calls him a heretic, you know. Charles Spurgeon.
Yeah, well, he wasn't claiming he's a prophet from God.
Did God use the Protestant reformers to bring that about?
Yeah, but they weren't claiming to be prophets of God, speaking on behalf of God and getting new visions, adding to the Bible, new visions in Scripture.
Yeah, I believe the gifts are still available. I think it doesn't happen very often, but I'm not a cessationist, so.
So what does Ellen White have to say before you would say, like, this is like a false prophet? Because he contradicts the Bible like multiple times. He says that the Sabbath is the seal of God, or the seal of those that are saved, and the Bible says the Holy Spirit is the seal that we are saved by. She makes all kinds of statements that contradict the Bible.
John, I don't want to take over your stream, man, but I can talk about this if you want.
No, you guys are welcome to discuss it.
And more people can join if they want to discuss something else.
I'm happy to talk about this somewhat. My goal isn't to defend Ellen White, but I will give you the answers that I know are out there for it.
Yeah, I've heard some of the stuff they use, try and use, just like I've heard some of this stuff Mormons use to explain to me why Joseph Smith's teachings doesn't contradict the Bible, even though it clearly does. He's still there. Hello? Did I lose connection?
No, you're still here. I think Jamie must have lost signal for a second.
Hello.
Jargon.
How you doing? What you were saying is very good, and it's just that there's a few things like you mentioned Martin Luther and stuff. He didn't have revelation. A lot of people didn't have revelation. They had what they call the Westminster Confession. You're familiar with that, right? Martin.
I think we lost him.
Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, you were talking to me.
Yeah. The Westminster Confession. You're familiar with the Westminster Confession? Yeah. What you're saying is very good, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the Westminster Confession.
You're not also a Seventh-day
Yeah, there's
Mormons.
Mormons. No, not me.
Okay. I'm so glad to hear that. You're not a
Mormons,
Mormon.
Seventh-day Adventists, and all them things. I was raised a Bible Baptist in Midwestern United States.
Okay.
Um,
But you sound very chilled. You sound. I love your voice. It's so chilled. It's almost like I thought you were high or something at one point. Because you're so chilled.
sometimes they start going off and stuff, But anyways, the Westminster Confession was put together by some 20 or so pastors from all over the area, and because there was a lot of false teachings, false prophecies going on, and so they had to get some order, try to put some order to that. So they all came together, and of course, they determined what the canon of Scripture is, right? And then they put together Westminster Confession. But the first sentence or the first paragraph, which is whole sentence, one sentence, says basically that God, since God stopped speaking, we're going to tell you what is defined as the Word of God, basically. And to me, that's a huge error, huge mistake.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the people.
I'll say 2 LPs.
You're familiar with the gifts, right?
Which gifts?
The gifts of the Spirit.
Yeah,
Different.
I've heard of it in the Bible.
Yeah.
But I don't know them from heart.
And there were prophets in the Old Testament. There was Deborah in the Old Testament. She was a prophet. There were the daughters of I forget his
but
name.
they weren't speaking in the church or giving new things, adding to the Bible.
But there was the office of the prophet in the New Testament, right?
But why does Paul then say that? You can go read it how he tries to drill it in that he doesn't allow women prophetess or whatever, in the church, standing in front of the church speaking for God.
To usurp the authority of men, right?
Yeah.
That's not permitted. But you can teach.
Kind of does it.
You can't teach. Yeah, right. You're right. That's why I'm saying you're right in a lot of things what you're saying.
Okay, cool.
I think the church.
Go ahead, Jim.
You wanted to say so?
Well, I was just going to say, I know the Seventh-day Adventist Church kind of has a little bit of a split based on how they interpret that idea about women preaching and what that verse, what Paul means and all that. Clearly, there's, I tend to fall on more the side you guys are saying, that women should be preachers, but they've allowed that. Some people think they shouldn't. So people that accept Ellen White as her role in the church, many of them still don't think women should be pastors preaching from the head of a church. So,
right.
I don't
and a lot of people
think that.
A lot of people will say that she's speaking to women, and the men don't have to listen to her, or don't need to.
Yeah, there's interpretations where you can accept someone as a prophet in that way, but still think that women shouldn't be pastors because.
But I think the problem what Martin is getting at is the false prophecies, the false teachings. Prophecies that fail. Clearly.
That's why their name it's even in their name. They call themselves Adventists because they were thinking he was coming back at that time.
I think every Christian thinks Jesus is coming back in the New Testament.
Sure, but not at that date when Jesus actually said no one knows at that time.
Well, I would say Adventists think, like I said, there were no Adventists when that happened. That they were people that came out of that. But I would think every Christian would want to claim Adventism as its definition is thinking that Christ, that's our hope. Well, but whatever.
The advent of Christ, but what he's trying to point out is that they said he was going to show up and he didn't. But they're not the only ones. A lot of people. Harold Camping made a bunch of predictions at the time on the radio. I don't know what happened to him, but he was saying that, God is coming. And he's a Calvinist. And
But William Miller was a Baptist, so.
But the thing is, he made at least 2 or 3 different predictions when the other ones failed, and he's still making predictions. They're still talking about it.
And she was trying to cover it up. She was making doctrines to cover it up and saying, no, we made a mistake. It's actually in heaven Jesus was going to come. In heaven, into the sanctuary or something, to spill blood there or something. And they put their sins on Satan. They say Satan is going to carry our sins, not Jesus.
Wow.
No.
Yeah, they do that.
Wow.
Satan, in the end, Satan is going to be the goat that is sent into the wilderness.
I would suggest looking at the scholarship on that, because even it's pretty hard to. The goat was called a Zazel that they sent out to the wilderness. The doctrine isn't that the sins of the people are put on Satan. The idea is that, like, in the end, he's to blame when he's destroyed. At the end of, the.
Well, I'll go and show you that they teach they put it on Satan, but then you'll just accept it because you're Seventh-day Adventist. But what I want to also sorry, what did you want to say?
Oh, I think it's I'm saying, like, it's how you interpret what they're saying. Obviously, they believe in the cross, and if you look at what that's based on, it's based on a type. It's a type from the Old Testament, the sacrifices, the Day of Atonement, and I would suggest reading Michael Heiser on this subject, because it's a real sensitive subject. Because do you know who Azazel is associated with? That name? That's what they called the goat that they sent out to the wilderness. So
then that's why they think it's Satan that's going to have our final, sins laid on him. But you don't find that in the Bible, like direct teaching.
Well, I would just say I wouldn't want to call the goat that represents Jesus Azazel. That's all I'd say.
But what I wanted...
There's a fine line between us being God and Satan. I mean...
What she was also saying is that everyone outside their church is not saved, and the Mormons did the same. They also claim everyone outside their church is not saved, and that you need Joseph Smith's teachings, the same as Seventh-day Adventists claim we need that teachings. Do you think we need those teachings, or is it good that we're not Seventh-day Adventists?
It's the flesh that's the flesh is put to death. You have to put to death the flesh.
What?
Jamie,
Jamie,
you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had to mute for a minute. Hey, man, let me just say too, if I sound really confrontational or rude, I didn't mean to be that way.
No. I'm just trying to help you and hear what you have to say, because I'm just worried that she might be like a false prophet and leading you astray.
Yeah.
I hear you.
So what would you say if she said that everyone outside their church, just like the Mormon church claimed, they would not be saved? And then later they changed it up.
I did an example, but as what I understand is that I'm no Ellen White scholar. But
but do you think we need the teachings?
Okay, so I can give you an answer of what the church tends to teach on this. I have a feeling it was more sounded more strict in the past, but most of the pastors I understand would say that people are saved outside of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They're called into the church because they believe they have the right doctrine. And then the whole thing with the mark of the beast is that's a future event. So it's not that anybody who goes to a Sunday church isn't going to go to heaven or has the mark of the beast. The doctrine says right before the end, there'll be like an antichrist figure that makes the law, like the law of the land, so that you have to go to church on Sunday or die or whatever.
And what if that never happens? Would you then realize that she's a false prophet, or if that prophecy never happens, huh?
Well, that doctrine.
I can't hear. Sorry. Is it on my side?
It's probably me. I have a limited space right now. The doctrine is that when that happens, that God will make it clear to everybody or his people and all the churches to make that decision. And that's kind of the idea of the mark of the beast. So like he'll make his commandments. He'll show to his people that are everywhere the clear distinction. And so if you then at that point that becomes the mark of the beast, because you make the decision for God or not God. And so they believe people who have been, the Protestant reformers or whoever, is going to go to heaven, because we don't believe people go to heaven when they die. Right?
I think she's a little bit obsessed with the Sabbath and even uses it in the church's name and makes it a salvation issue, while the Sabbath in the Old Testament was just pointing to Jesus. That's our final rest. So we're in constant rest now because Jesus did all the work on our behalf.
Yeah.
So now we can rest in God. We don't have to like.
I think you're right. I think the Sabbath has a certain purpose. I still think you should keep it, but I think because it's in the commandments, the moral commandments. I mean, he didn't have to put it in the middle of the moral commandments, which I would say are still obviously something that we do. So that's something I just can't get past. But yeah, I think you're right.
I should show you a video of ex-Seventh-day Adventist explaining what the Sabbath was and why it was a covenant between him, God, and the Israelites, and it doesn't apply to us. We are now after Jesus and we're in his rest. It was pointing always to him, and Jesus even worked on the Sabbath. It wasn't like he was Lord over the Sabbath. He said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And Ellen White kind of turns that around and causes people to claim people will go to hell that doesn't keep the Sabbath or something.
Yeah, that's not right. And there's different groups, within the church. It's a big group. So there's more really conservative versions, of course, or more strict and probably wrong, in my opinion. But I would be careful saying that Jesus worked on the Sabbath, because I think an important doctrine is that Christ is sinless.
He said he worked. He literally said his Father works and he works. He didn't try and hide. And he said that the Sabbath was made for man. It was for our benefit that it was made. But Ellen White turns that around and says people are going to go to hell for not keeping the Sabbath or keeping the wrong day of the Sabbath. And she adds a lot of rules to the Sabbath as well. So she doesn't just say there's a Sabbath. She adds more rules to the Sabbath that you can't do.
I'm just going to be careful
about what I
claim here. So I don't want to misspeak about it, but I disagree with that. That's what she's saying. But I mean, I'd be happy to.
You don't think the Sunday Sabbath is a mark of the beast like she taught? That it's going to be the mark of the beast, and people are going to go to hell. That
I think it's the best way to understand that idea. I don't see how what else the Antichrist seeks to change times and laws, and that's the only law that has a time in it. And so if you think people think once saved always saved, and yet at the end time there's this time where somehow people are gonna need to buy food and sell stuff, and it's about man-made laws, and if they do that they're gonna not be saved. How does that even work?
I definitely don't think it has to do with the Sabbath. That people are going to go to hell for not keeping the Sabbath or keeping the wrong day of the Sabbath.
Well, like I said, you heard what I was saying before, right? It's not that if you don't keep the Sabbath, you go to hell. It's something at the end time, and nobody ever believes that people that go to church on Sunday are lost. Like, I don't think if you die tomorrow and because you go to church on Sunday, you're going to hell because of that. Nobody teaches that.
Yeah, but she says it's the stamp of approval. It's like the seal of God, the Sabbath. While the Bible teaches the Holy Spirit is the seal of God. Nothing says nothing about the Sabbath being the seal of God, and it gives no reapplyment of the Sabbath in the New Testament, and says you shouldn't even judge someone for a Sabbath or a new moon or anything else they eat. Are you like a vegan? Because I see Seventh-day Adventists go so far as to subscribe veganism, and you may not drink coffee, and I don't know, you may not drink tea, or I don't know what they also command their people not to do.
I eat meat and I drink coffee and worse. So
Okay, so you don't subscribe to that kind of Seventh-day Adventist doctrine.
no, they have a health message. They tend to live longer. It's probably a good thing. I don't follow that. It's not like you have to. It's just an idea, biblical diet type thing. But and that's how they interpret that verse about Sabbaths. The new moons and Sabbaths were the things in the laws of Moses, or the things that were written on paper, not the Ten Commandments. And the argument goes like that. So the Sabbaths he's talking about are festivals, new moons. That phrase, if you look it up and see how it's used, it's in that context.
And I really think Jesus didn't hammer in the Sabbath. People wanted to kill him because he wasn't keeping the Sabbath, according to them. Healing people on the Sabbath, telling people to pick up their mats and walk, which in those days they said you can't do that because it's the Sabbath. They also went crazy over the Sabbath, like Ellen White goes. And
I disagree with those people that do that. I think they're wrong.
Well, I'm glad you try and speak to people about it and try and figure out what's going on there. I suggest you do a lot of research, because there's so many red flags with that woman, that prophetess. There's a lot of red flags. I just worry about.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Pleasure.
So I can't really talk right now because of where I'm at, but I appreciate your concern.
Thanks, man. And so perhaps I could read you this. There was in John 5. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." So he doesn't tell them, no, I'm not working on the Sabbath. You got this wrong. He says, my Father is working and I'm working on the Sabbath.
I would say the work he's doing isn't.
So he's not obsessed at all about the Sabbath.
Right.
Like
I agree
Ellen
with
White
you. Yeah, there's people that take it to the limit that misses the whole point. But I still would say he didn't break the commandment. I don't think you want Jesus breaking a commandment, because then
he's the Lord of the Sabbath, and he made Sabbath for man benefit. But Ellen White seems to want to condemn people and make it a salvation issue and put it in the church's name, Seventh-day Adventists. They call it the Seventh Day for a reason, because he was obsessed with the Sabbath, even adding rules to the Sabbath.
I just say
he wasn't keeping
14.
it either. Huh?
Read Revelation 14:12.
What does it say there? Read it for me.
Sorry, I just don't have a Bible in front of me. It's it's the what? Here are those who get to enter the city. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, or the testimony of Jesus, I think that's a good thing to be proud of.
Yeah, I think wanting to do what God commands is a good thing, but I think there's a mistake of taking the Old Testament commands and applying it and pushing it on people today. Like Jesus was not obsessed with that Sabbath command at all. But like I said, Ellen White seems totally obsessed with the Sabbath. He wrote thousands of lines on the Sabbath, about the Sabbath and how people are gonna go to hell because of the Sabbath, and for going on Sunday. Crazy stuff. But it's interesting. I hope you learned something, and just go learn more about it. If you find something interesting, I would also like to see, because I love learning about Seventh-day Adventism and Mormonism, and
Yeah. Try sticking with the Bible. It's
but I like learning about it so I can help people. You understand?
Yeah, right. No, I'm not talking.
Yes.
I'm saying,
Yeah, I think the
right.
Bible is solid ground, and if you go
No,
to
that's
like Ellen White, then you're walking on shaky ground.
right. No, what you have is a gift for, and concern for people that are being misled by false teachings.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong. I was wondering what country you live in and what kind of church you go to.
Well, I go to a Reformed church, and I live in South Africa.
Oh, South Africa. Okay.
So English is not my first language. So I wish English was my first language, then I could better express myself to you guys and better help people.
But I'm surprised with your learning, your understanding of the Bible and history and church teaching, doctrine, and everything. It's
Yeah,
just
I
that
know a few things because I talk to Seventh-day Adventists, but I don't know everything. Like, my knowledge is still very limited against all the knowledge there is of the Bible.
Well, my concern is to be aware of anything taught by men after the fact. Like whether it be Islam or Protestantism. You're familiar with Martin Luther, right? He
has my name.
He had okay. Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, I know.
Be careful with that, because he was one of the contributors for the events that led up to the Holocaust, and he cursed and he swore, used bad language and all kinds of things, which I didn't know anything about until a Jewish person showed me his writings.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about him because no one is like a Martin Luther, and I haven't come across one talking to me about Martin Luther, but I've come across a lot of guys talking about Ellen White and how good Ellen White is and how she's a prophetess, and you need to listen to her and you need her writings.
Yeah,
she
the
adds
reason
26 books to the Bible.
Yeah,
26.
the reason is I was raised a Protestant, more like because Baptist, Protestant, pretty much the same thing in a lot of cases, with the exception of Anabaptists, which existed before Protestants. But the Protestant teaching was, as the name says, it was protesting the Catholic Church, and our faith is not a protest against another faith. Our faith is in what the truth is.
Yeah.
But in spite of that, besides that, as I was saying, the Westminster Confession was a group of like 20 pastors from all the area in England. They got together and they put together the Presbyterian Westminster Confession, and then the Baptists pretty much copied the Westminster Confession, except they changed it from sprinkling to immersing.
Yeah, I think that those things are like secondary things, and that's not like the most important thing in Christianity.
Yeah.
I understand. I would still call someone a brother for sprinkling or immersing. You understand?
Yeah, but the thing is that you're not expected to believe that the Westminster Confession is God's word, except you're expected to believe in it as if it was God's word. That's what the doctrine is of the church is, whether it's Protestant or Baptist or whatever.
And what do you think about Islam?
I think it's after the fact. It's like irrelevant to the story.
I think it's like satanic or something. There's a lot of messed up stuff going on there. Like even Muhammad was talking about that he came in contact with a demon in a cave, and he thought it's a demon. Later, someone tried to convince him that it's just an angel from God.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of messed up stuff going on there. But I love Muslim testimonies. I love them. When they testify, there's a lot of testimonies of Muslims coming in contact with God, and they realize they were deceived their whole life, and then they become Christians. And
Oh
you won't
yeah.
find one example. I still look for one example of Allah appearing to someone testifying that Allah appeared to him and told him anything. I would see that as, because I'm still looking for that, while the internet is full of the Muslims claiming that Jesus came to them and changed their whole life.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, even in England, there's a lot of testimonies of people seeing Jesus, the one that they hated so much,
Mm.
and how that they were surprised at his nature and character, and that it's totally contrary to what their Islamic teaching was.
Yeah, and but so if an atheist would want to counter that evidence, he would need me to provide me with a example of Allah coming to people, or Muslims claiming Allah came to them, because I can't find one. While
Right.
I could find many Muslims testifying that Jesus came to them and then they became a Christian.
Yeah, if they want to say it's comparable to Christianity, right? You're right.
Yeah. So, what do you guys want to talk about more? Or do you want to end the stream more?
I'm trying to find a cord so I can plug it in because I'm running low on battery here. I just got to plug this in here. Hold on. Hopefully, I got to restart this. Okay. Oh, I got to change.
So, jungle jargon. I'm jealous of you that it's your first language. That English is your first language.
Yeah, and besides it all, on top of it all, I learned to speak English in the Amazon jungle rainforest.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
What's that?
Is that true, or is that a joke?
No, it's true. It's true.
Is that why you have a lioness or a jaguar, or what do you call it?
Right. That's why.
So how did you learn it there? You were brought up there, or what?
How did I learn it? Oh, I went to a private American school. Sorry, I'm trying to do something here. Trying to get.
You're trying to multitask like a girl. We can't multitask as good as girls.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend in the army. He was saying, "Can't you do two things at once?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Yeah, you need to learn to do two things: talk and work at the same time. Walk and chew gum at the same time."
Yeah, well, we actually do a lot of things at the same time, but you can't do like super lot of things.
Well, me in
Women can
particular,
do
because
more than us.
that's just because I'm really focused on what I'm thinking about, pretty much.
Yeah, men are usually like that. But like
Yeah.
women can have a baby in their hand, talk to someone on the other side, and multitask like crazy.
Yeah, they can wake up in the middle of the night, take care of the baby and just fall back to sleep. And if I wake up, I can't.
you
It's
can't
like-
sleep.
It's like they're awake 1 minute and then they're back to sleep. Next.
No, I sometimes struggle to sleep. My brain, like over time, wants to think. It just doesn't want to stop thinking.
Yeah.
Do you sleep easily?
No, it depends. Like you said, if I'm really deep in thought, I have to slow down, calm down.
How do you do that? Like, how do you calm down?
I just have patience and I just wait and just, if I can get a distraction going, like something monotonous, then I'll just fall asleep. And I'll get tired and fall asleep. But sleep is very important, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and that's why I need to find a find a way to easily fall asleep. I wish there was like just a switch that I can pull and
Yeah.
then I would fall asleep.
No, I just wait. Even if I can't fall asleep, I just keep waiting and just try to be inactive as much as possible, and then usually then you'll get sleepy and you'll fall
Yeah, you have
asleep.
to try and think about nothing.
Yeah.
It's impossible for me to try and think about
Well,
nothing.
sometimes I'll put a YouTube video on and I'll start listening to that and I'll just fall asleep.
Yeah, I have to put on something really boring.
Yeah.
Put Danny on speaking, and then you would fall asleep. No, I'm joking.
Oh, but the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and not that it's real. I mean, it is really important to me, but
Sure.
not I don't want to upset you or anything because
No, no,
you
go for
have
it.
you have a lot of good teaching, and
Tune me, come on.
I was wondering what church you're learning all this stuff in, and you said it's not what do you call it, conservative, not
A Reformed
conservative,
church, but I don't learn
reform.
all that in the church. I do my own studies as well
Yeah,
outside the church,
yeah, yeah. That's good.
because
Um,
otherwise you get perhaps biased information, and I want like multiple viewpoints. That's why I also talk to these people, so that I can realize if I have made a mistake.
yeah.
Um,
Well, if you really want to know, like you were telling the other guy, Jeremy, the other guy, what is it? Um, you know, if there's something to change, because this bothered me, because I was raised in the evangelical, Protestant teaching, and everything, and then I found out Martin Luther was not the kind of reformer that we sometimes think of, and
mm,
but this idea of something outside of the Bible being believed as if it was the Bible,
mm.
like the Westminster Confession. That's a very shaky thing, especially when it admits it's not the Bible. So
Yeah, it's quite shaky if you build on anything else, but the Bible. This Bible is solid foundation. But it's still good to get more information outside the Bible. Even in the Bible, it talks about people trying to explain what's going on in the Bible to help other people
yeah,
realize what's.
because there's a contradiction about God's word, what God's word is, and I've always known God's word to be living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, dividing asunder the different parts, soul and spirit, mind, body, um, and the fact that the Spirit of God convicts everybody. So God is effectively speaking to everybody, and then to say that in the Westminster Confession, where it says, "Well, since God stopped speaking to people, now we'll say this: we'll take God's place, sit in His chair, and decide for you what the Word of God is." That's, to me, is very dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. It's that all the false religions add to the Bible. Um, they try and, like, even the Catholic Church add their documents to the Bible. The Mormon Church, they add a lot of documents to the Bible. Seventh-day Adventists as well.
Big,
The Islam also claims they believe in the biblical God, and they think it's the word of God and everything, but they add to the Bible.
yeah, because nowhere in the Bible does it say that God at one time will stop speaking to people. It does say, if anybody comes preaching another gospel, let him be accursed. But it never says that God will stop operating the way He did in times past, like the Westminster Confession comes out and says.
Well, and one of the major components you have to insert into that point you're making there, Jungle, is one of the key components of Christianity in Scripture and the ripping in twain of the veil between in the temple, right?
Yeah.
Was that we no longer required the priest. That was the whole point, right? One of the symbolic actions of that, and that to your point of God speaking to us, is we have the capacity now as the saved to communicate directly with God. God will speak directly to us, and
Yeah, that's
So we
a good.
don't need the Pope or a priest.
Yeah.
exactly. And that's where earlier today, when I was on my tangent about like what the modern quote unquote church has turned into, and so many of the different ramifications that are derived from us putting so much emphasis on this, whether it be a woman, male, doesn't matter, this pastor character, right? We're assigning all of this supposed authority to that individual, and the end, whether or not we shouldn't have leaders in the church, that's not the point. I'm talking about the assignment of them supposedly being the
Arbiters.
the arbiter, right? Again, as I said earlier, consciously or subconsciously, it results in humans assigning faith into that human individual, and as we know, all humans are flawed, and that's why I find it so fascinating when, especially atheists, but even people who are supposedly Christian or believers or whatever, they lose their faith when this pastor or whoever falls. Right. Has an affair or turns out to be, doing something evil or an embezzler or whatever. Somehow that crushes their faith.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, hang on. The whole reason we need a savior is because we do not have the capacity to be what is required. We cannot ever overcome sin because we are all we're humans. Therefore, we are flawed. Therefore, we will fail.
And the thing is, it's not even supposed to be that way. You're not supposed to have one leader. Everybody is allowed to speak and encouraged to speak, and then everyone else passes judgment. It's not a one-man show. It's not a one-man band.
Right. And that, I think, that's you guys were kind of mentioning like some of the different subtle twists that have been applied in a lot of these different sects or whatever you want to call them, Mormonism and whatnot. They've taken the foundation of the truth and then applied slightly different twists to it, which it's kind of like the butterfly effect, right? Or you've over a long distance, a very slight angle change ends up in a dramatically different destination than if you'd maintained the correct course. And I feel like that's what's going on in many aspects in, again, quote unquote, modern churches.
Because they were taking what they knew and understood of the Bible, which was not as much as what we know today with access to Hebrew and Greek and all this stuff, that, it was good at the time when everyone was completely ignorant of what the Bible even said. Then Gutenberg translated the Bible into the language of the German or whatever people were speaking, and that's when we came out of the Dark Ages. That's when we had the information, Industrial Revolution and all that stuff was after the Enlightenment, which is because of God's word being understood by the common people. But so there was a lot of people that were scholars that knew a lot more than the average person and had to teach the masses. But today it's no longer like that with the access that we have, plus the fact that the church is supposed to operate in a way where you listen to everyone, what everyone has to say, because God uses the least impressive person to speak for him. And
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is that the Catholic Church wanted to stop the translation or for everyone to have the Bible, and they persecuted those guys that wanted to translate it so that people could read it.
Yeah.
I worry about Catholics, Roman Catholics.
And then Gutenberg put it into print where everybody could have a copy in their own hands.
And what's so bad about that? I don't understand why they wanted to like kill those people that did it.
Well, and this goes back to the point I made earlier about the it now being many aspects of religion in quotes and Christianity in quotes. What it's perceived to be in the modern era is just another iteration of, in many ways, I'm talking about from like the high level denominational perspective, right? The end outcome of power, right? And influence. And well, I mean, do I think necessarily the first pope was a horrible, corrupt individual? No, not necessarily. Do I think that every pope has been a horrible person?
He was, because he was Peter, and Jesus called Peter Satan, and Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and so they called him the first pope. So he was messed up.
Yeah, well, fair. I mean, I mean, in the context of like full scale corruption. Yeah. I know what you're saying, but I mean, okay, so we'll fast forward down. Like, do I think, I forget some of the names, but some of the different ones. I mean, the popes in the early time, like they were corrupt, straight up evil individuals, right? Yeah. They didn't believe what they were in charge of. It was a political move. Like that's all it was. And power. We know beyond doubt that there were many who became priests for the only reason their objective was to become a bishop or a cardinal, or like that was their macro objective. And the same thing applies now. We see it in real time with all these people who are avowed atheists who go to seminary to get doctorates in theology. Like, hang on. Your focus is on theology with a subdiscipline in Christianity, but you didn't become an atheist. You're already an atheist. And now you're being a professor of theology. Like, we don't think there's any semblance of you're manipulating the truth here. Like, that's not the rational deduction I can reach here. Come on now, let's get real. And then we wonder why we observe all these people who are supposed ministers and they become pastors and all this other stuff. They take these different authority roles, and then they're either not preaching the gospel or it's some hybridized, twisted version, and or they ultimately end up being corrupt. And I'm not suggesting that there are people who are true believers and they don't also fall. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying in the level to which there seems to be corruption on all scales, on all levels of the modern church, again in quotes, from the denominational organization perspective all the way into the individual locations. It's rife. It's everywhere. And again, my point, I mean, I'm just applying this concept to the exact same thing of what happened to the Catholic Church. Like, okay, so what was the point of the Protestant Reformation? To throw off the overbearing power and corruption of the Catholic Church, right? Well, that was what, 600 years ago?
And if you go to a Lutheran church, it's almost the same thing as the Catholic Church. That's the irony of it all.
My point, like, that was 600 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that's not unrealistic that the same type of end outcome and corruption could be perpetuating what once was the result of the Reformation has also become corrupt. And I would say that's not a great leap of didn't require a giant jump to reach that conclusion.
Yeah. Most major denominations are already apostate, Methodist, some of them maybe not, but Presbyterian, USA, all of them, they're just straight out contrary to the teaching of the Bible.
I think one of the other things we got to also consider, and sidebar, everybody, we're going to wrap this stream up here in just a couple minutes because over on SFT, they're going to be rolling out a live stream with Dr. McQueen on dating methods, and I believe they're going to be discussing one of the topics we're going to be discussing is the evidence for accelerated nuclear decay, which I think should be very fascinating. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description.
I thought you were going to say that I have to cut some lumber. I have to.
Let's see.
No, just kidding.
You should say, I'm gonna sort out Danny. I have to go.
Yeah, that's.
But yeah, I think this YouTube community is more of what God had in mind for the church to begin with, where everybody is allowed to say what they think and what they believe and why, and then other people will say what they think and why, what they believe and why. And I
Yeah,
think
and
that
there's no Pope.
that is much more productive to me than sitting in a pew listening to one person speak. Even though he may have been to a Bible school and learned everything they taught him in the Bible school, you're still going to get a particular bias or view of whatever he learned. So I think the YouTube community that we have here is the ideal situation for learning what the Bible says.
Well,
Seems
I
like there's
agree.
another Seventh-day Adventist here.
Yeah, Dr. Carter is a. I put it up on the screen, but he's a. Dr. Carter says, "I am an SDA conservative EGW supporting caffeine-free vegan one too." So Jamie and Morton, he also put his email in the message.
Yeah, he wants me to become one too. It seems that's why.
So he follows the dietary practices, and I guess.
Well, see, I think I'm gonna mess with Dr. Carter for a second. So I think it's because he's a PhD biochemist that because he understands metabolism and the potential benefit of the diet, therefore it proves SDA beyond all doubt. I'm just saying. Yeah. No, I love Dr. Carter. He's a brilliant man. Great conversations. I strongly recommend folks to check out some of the great discussions. I had a fantastic discussion with him here with Sal and Dr. Carr. They discussed racemization dating problems. Then he's had some very fantastic discussions with Sal, and I know that they're actually working on several more very in-depth discussion topics on some pretty fundamental conundrums, shall we say, in the biochemistry and genetic arena. Oh man, look who came back. Jamie's decided to rejoin us. He reconnected to the internet.
There's the waffle maker. No, I got to go cut some lumber. I want to listen to that live stream, but then I got to get something done today.
Jamie, I'm going to be wrapping up here in just a minute. Do you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I just wanted to point out that I hear what Jungle is saying, and I think you got to be careful there. But like a lot of I have a little more sympathy for the different views in the sense that confessions tend to be, what we all have to interpret the Bible. There's just no way around it. And so to some level, they're kind of like statements of faith, right? So they're trying to make sense of it the best they can, and then the people form around that, and so you can't blame them for that. I think there's a difference between that and like Pope.
No.
And so
right,
that's what the protest is
statements
about, right?
of faith. Yeah, statements of faith I can understand, and they're very interesting to read. And that's one of the things I like to read is a statement of faith. But when you say that God stopped speaking and now we're going to take God's place and tell you what God says, that is a big problem.
Yeah, I think that's what the protest was about, essentially, in a way. And then a lot of people don't like those names. I mean, I have a problem with the Baptist confession, or the Westminster confession, because it seems to affirm free will, and then it seems like it doesn't. And so, I should have realized Martin was a Reformed guy. I mean, I respect people who are Reformed. I listen to Reformed speakers, and I'm trying to figure out what is the bottom line for who we cast out, and I think that's something that should be talked about.
Yeah, it's the main thing is the gospel, and all the false religions tackle that gospel and try and pervert it. I think Seventh-day Adventism also tries to tackle that gospel and try and put in works like you have to keep the Sabbath to be saved and stuff like that. So they try and smuggle in works. The same with the Catholic Church. They also try and smuggle in works like you have to be baptized or otherwise you won't be saved. And the Muslims do the same. They claim you have to do good works and it has to outweigh your bad works. So yeah.
I think you should check out the fundamental beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventists. There's 28 on their website, and they're all based on scripture.
I have checked them out. Them out.
He's interested. I'm not.
No, I've talked a lot with Seventh-day Adventists, so I would love to talk with the doctor as well, and hear what he has to say. Because I wish I was wrong. I wish I was wrong about Catholics perverting the gospel, and I wish I was wrong about Muslims perverting it, and Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons. I wish I was wrong. Just like I wish I was wrong about Hitler existing, but yeah.
If any Adventist says you have to do works to be saved, then they're reprobate.
They won't directly say it, just like Catholics won't directly say it.
Yeah.
Roman Catholic won't directly tell you, "Oh, we have to do works to be saved." No, they just claim it's by faith, but then they smuggle in works.
Catechism. It's in the catechism.
Almost everybody smuggles in works when the work is what the Holy Spirit does in your life to convince you to do otherwise, and you're still going to be judged by your works. It's just that some people are convinced to tell the truth, and other people are not, or haven't been convinced by the Holy Spirit, because they haven't drawn near to God. They haven't listened to His word. But
okay, guys, we got to gonna wrap up, and everybody head on over to SFT's channel. Before we do, Jungle and Martin, anything last words before we wrap up?
No, thank you for letting us talk, man. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I'm good. Just everybody draw near to God, and He will draw near to you.
Very,
awesome.
Very well said. Well, folks, I appreciate everybody sticking around, watching this interesting stream, kind of impromptu. Ended up going for 3.5 hours. I had some great conversations, covered a lot of topics. Hope everybody enjoyed. And as I always like to say at the end of these kind of streams when I'm actually still awake, as you consider the different reasons for your conclusions, by the necessities for your existence, what is the big picture for your overall existence, and whether or not it is reasonable to conclude that there is a higher power, you are not purposeless, and there is underlying meaning for your very existence. Make sure, as you analyze all the evidence and the arguments that are put forth, that the conclusion you reach is a logical, plausible, and probable one. Thanks a lot, y'all.